Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little strange, a little imperial, and possibly a little too silky. We're talking about pajamas. Byzantine pajamas. You're about to enter a world where emperors wore embroidered nightgowns to court, had ceremonial bedtime routines, and genuinely believed in the political power of lounging wear. You wouldn't survive 5 minutes there unless you enjoyed 5-hour standing ceremonies while wrapped in gold-trimmed silk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little empire reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing just inside the main gates of Constantinople. The air smells of faint incense, olive oil, and bureaucracy. The marble beneath your feet is so polished you're afraid to take a step. Someone clearly buffed it with more care than most people give their own children. And you're tired. Not tired like, I had a long day at work. Tired. No, you're Byzantine tired. That's a whole new level. You've been awake since the pre-dawn hymns, you've sat through a 6-hour morning liturgy, and you've watched 3 courtiers argue about the shade of blue in a holy tapestry. Your eyes want to close, but your supervisor, the master of imperial protocol, keeps gently clearing his throat, reminding you that slouching is a punishable offense. You shuffle forward, your slippers barely making a sound. That's intentional. Loud steps are considered impolite. You're in the sacred palace now, and everything here is designed to be slow, quiet, and deeply symbolic, like one of those museum audio tours that never quite gets to the point. And there he is, the emperor, Basil VI, or maybe it's Constantine VII. To be honest, they all blur together eventually. Men wrapped in purple silk standing under gilded canopies, looking mildly annoyed but too holy to show it. Today he's wearing his court pajamas. Yes, pajamas. They're not exactly what you'd wear to bed, not unless your bed is blessed by the patriarch and guarded by eunuchs. But they are made of silk, dyed the richest imperial purple. A color so exclusive that commoners caught wearing it could be relocated. Let's just say relocated. The cuffs are trimmed with golden thread, stitched in patterns resembling heavenly gates. Angels are embroidered down the front, their faces serene, like they too are fighting the urge to yawn. And the fabric rustles softly like a lullaby woven by tax collectors. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows the emperor is most powerful when he looks the most relaxed. That's the secret. Byzantium runs on ritual and fabric. You catch a glimpse of his slippers. Red velvet edged with pearls. They are ceremonial. They are blessed. They are probably too warm. You wonder if the emperor's toes ever itch. Do they get sweaty? Do they slip? These are the questions history doesn't answer. You continue walking down the hall past icons in golden frames and tapestries that probably took 10 years to complete, only to be used as sound insulation. Every so often, a page boy scurries past holding a small tray with something ambiguous on it. Maybe rose water, maybe wax for mustache maintenance. You pause beside a colonnade. A breeze drifts in. The sea is somewhere out there, glinting like a forgotten coin in the sunlight. You think of your own pajamas back home. Cotton, probably, faded, possibly stolen by your roommate. You do not command respect. They do not have angels on the collar. You feel deeply, profoundly underdressed. A courtier next to you whispers, he's switching to the nightgown soon. You nod, pretending you knew that already. Of course, the gown change, a sacred moment, like halftime but with incense. There's a ritual. 2 attendants bring in a linen robe. It's pale, woven with threads so fine they shimmer like spider silk in candlelight. This is the in-between robe, worn only for moments of transition. Scholars still debate its purpose. Some say it's spiritual, others say it's because the emperor gets sweaty. You watch as the emperor raises his arms slightly. The attendants slip off the purple silk and replace it with the linen gown. The room falls silent as if history itself is pausing to let this happen. And then, he sits. Yes, he sits. In the court of the Chrysotriclinos, that is practically a miracle. It's been 6 hours. The emperor is sitting, which means you might get to sit too. Someone coughs. Not a real cough. More like a polite warning that the emperor is about to speak. You lean forward slightly, straining to hear. Bring the night icons, he says, his voice like aged honey on cold stone. Servants appear, each carrying small framed icons. They are placed near the emperor's bedside, not because he's going to bed, but because Byzantines believed proximity to holy images kept the night's dreams pure, or at least less treasonous. It's now officially the evening protocol, which means you've only got 3 more hours of standing around before the final hymn. Unless, of course, you're chosen to fluff the ceremonial pillows. A great honor, but also an incredible wrist workout. You stifle a yawn. No one is looking at you, which in the Byzantine court means you are either invisible, or about to be promoted, or executed. You can never really tell. A faint chime echoes through the hall, the signal that the sun has dipped below the Hagia Sophia's dome. Shadows stretch across the marble. Somewhere a scribe is recording all this in endless, meticulous detail. You, meanwhile, are trying not to fall asleep standing up. But that's the magic of Byzantium. Everything is so slow, so detailed, so filled with purpose, that eventually your brain gives in. You stop thinking. You stop resisting. You drift. You imagine soft pillows, linen gowns, angelic embroidery, and the rustle of silk. You let the hush of incense and protocol wash over you. And somewhere in the distance, an emperor in pajamas quietly begins his nightly vigil. The incense is still in the air, subtle now, like a memory. You're walking deeper into the palace, though the pace is barely a pace. It's more of a ceremonial shuffle. You've learned not to move too quickly in the sacred palace. If you do, people assume you're either an assassin or a very ambitious junior bureaucrat. Neither ends well. You pass a row of enormous bronze doors, each one engraved with scenes of imperial grandeur, processions, coronations, heavenly interventions involving a suspicious number of doves. And then through the final archway it opens up before you. The Augustean. No, not the stadium, not the church, the courtyard. It's early morning, but not really morning, the kind of morning that doesn't know what it wants to be. A little too blue to be night, too cold to be day. The sun is trying, bless it, but it's losing the battle to a thick layer of Constantinopolitan mist, the kind that wraps around domes and spires like a very clingy ghost. You hear a sound, not a loud one, a sort of low, repetitive shuffle. That's the sound of the hippodrome waking up. It's just over the wall, technically part of the palace complex, technically not. It's like the empire's living room, where politics, racing, rioting, and the occasional well-timed assassination all mingle in that warm Byzantine way. The stands are already filling. Cloaks of every shade hang over marble ledges, flapping gently in the mist. The factions, the blues and the greens, are preparing for the day's races, yes. But really, this is about loyalty. Blue or green wasn't just your favorite color, it was your entire personality. You, of course, are pretending to be neutral. That's what smart people do. Publicly, privately, you're totally team blue, or maybe green. Depends on the day, depends on who's watching. Someone hands you a small cup of oxymel, a vinegar honey drink. It tastes exactly how it sounds, like betrayal and citrus, but it's tradition. You sip it while adjusting your outer robe. It's important to look mildly uncomfortable. Comfort suggests rebellion. The emperor won't be at the races today. Not in person. He's busy with something called sacred introspection, which, based on palace rumors, involves incense, a harpist, and 4 different types of warm milk. Instead, his presence is shown symbolically via a golden standard placed in the imperial box. It waves a little in the wind as if it's unsure it wants to represent him today. Below it, you spot one of the chief courtiers nodding off. His head dips, then jerks up, then dips again. This continues for a full 3 minutes before someone mercifully sneezes nearby, jolting him back to consciousness. You feel the weight of your own eyelids. There's something about this place, this air, that begs for naps. Even the statues look like they're blinking in slow motion, then trumpets. Sort of. Not the bold, brassy fanfare you might expect. Byzantine trumpets sound more like angry flutes that didn't get enough sleep. But they do the job. Everyone straightens up. The chariots are entering. The teams, blue, green, occasionally red or white, if they remember to show up, roll in with fanfare and very stiff shoulders. Their armor is ceremonial, their horses better groomed than any person you know. You spot one horse with a tiny ribbon tied to its mane, a nod to the Virgin Mary perhaps, or a very niche fashion statement. As the race begins, the crowd doesn't just cheer, they chant. Long, droning calls that sound half prayer, half political threat. Someone's already shouting about tax reform. Someone else is singing a song about the emperor's left ear, which has allegedly been blessed by St. Andrew. No one knows what's real anymore. A noble beside you mutters, "It's quieter than last week." You nod, "Much quieter." Last week, someone threw a fish at the blue team. A large, smoked one. No one knows how they snuck it in, but they did. You close your eyes for a moment, just a moment. The chants become waves. The hoof beats a lullaby. The mist curls around your ankles like a sleepy cat. You start to drift, and then someone says, very softly, "The emperor's slippers were aired out last night." You don't open your eyes, you just whisper, "Thank God." Because this is Byzantium, and that sentence is not only logical, it's vital. The emperor's footwear must be perfectly aired, especially if he's planning to make a brief appearance at court today, wearing his morning robe. You heard rumors about it last night, of course, that today's robe features new embroidery, small golden doves carrying scrolls of divine wisdom, and possibly raisins. The seamstress has bad vision. Back at the palace, preparations are already underway. Courtiers are lining their belts exactly 3 fingers below the navel. One of the scribes is copying out today's ceremonial dialogue, pausing occasionally to sigh and consider a different career. Meanwhile, you, still pretending to watch the race, begin to picture the emperor's bedroom. It's a high-ceiling chamber with a canopy made of woven silver thread. The curtains are so heavy it takes 3 servants to move one. The walls are painted a dark blue, scattered with tiny golden stars. Not painted randomly, oh no. Each star corresponds to a saint's feast day, so technically when the emperor dreams, he dreams under a calendar. You once overheard that the mattress was stuffed with eagle feathers, chosen not for softness but because they inspire imperial dreams. You're not sure what that means. No one is. And then, just as your mind begins to wander too far, you feel a nudge, a very gentle one, a reminder it's time to go. The court summons are being distributed, which means the emperor will appear, even briefly, possibly in his intermediate lounging ensemble, a garment you once heard described as a cloud made of silk and anxiety. You rise from your seat. The race is still happening, but no one's watching anymore. The real drama is elsewhere now, in silk hallways, in whispered preparations, in the drawing of curtains and lighting of ceremonial oil lamps. You begin to walk back, past statues, past guards who look like they haven't blinked since the iconoclasm, past a very determined cat who seems to run the entire southwest corner of the courtyard, and as the incense rises again and your robes catch a passing breeze, you can't help but wonder, what color will the emperor's pajamas be today? You're moving now along one of the side colonnades of the great palace, your sandals whispering against the smooth limestone floor. Everything in this part of the complex is designed to slow you down. The columns are close together, the lanterns are dim, and the corridors twist just enough that you start to question whether you're walking in circles or if Byzantium itself is slowly spinning around you. And then, there it is, the hippodrome, fully awake and roaring, but not with the usual energy, not today. Today it's a long, drawn-out roar, less like a crowd and more like a grumpy stomach digesting politics. The chariot race is still going on, lap after endless lap, but no one's really paying attention to the horses anymore. No, the real sport is the shouting. You step out into one of the imperial viewing niches high above the track, and you hear them clearly now. Chants, some rhythmic, some desperate, some possibly composed by someone on 3 hours of sleep and 2 bowls of pickled onions. It's a chorus of complaint like Twitter, but with tunics. Lower the taxes. Bring back the old bread. Restore the dignity of the green faction. Make mosaics great again. You glance at one of the guards near the edge. His expression doesn't change, but his eyes are screaming. Not again. To your left, a scholar mutters, "It's the 5th time this month." You'd think they'd at least update their slogans. Down in the crowd, banners ripple in the breeze. Some are carefully embroidered, some hastily scribbled in wine on linen. You spot one that simply reads, "Where is the cheese?" No one knows, but the people demand answers. This technically is a sporting event, but here in the Byzantine Empire, a day at the Hippodrome is rarely just about sport. It's about factions, loyalty, and political soft threads shouted over horse hooves. You try to focus on the race. The chariots are still circling, horses panting, wheels creaking. One rider looks like he regrets everything. It's lap 9. or 10, or eternity. You stifle a yawn, not because you're bored, but because the entire atmosphere encourages exhaustion. The sky is clouding over again, not dramatically, just enough to dim everything to a comfortable gloom. Someone hands you a small dried fig. You eat it slowly. It tastes like time itself. Sweet, dense, slightly unsure whether it's still good. Then a whisper reaches your ear. Did you hear? He's wearing the long robe today. You stop mid-chew. The long robe, not the medium robe, not the slightly ceremonial one with doves on the hem. No, this is the long one. The one reserved for major occasions and days when the emperor needs the public to remember who invented divine right. You turn back toward the palace. The energy shifts. People around you begin repositioning themselves, not rushing. Rushing is beneath a courtier's dignity, but definitely angling, positioning, adjusting creases in their sleeves and subtly checking their breath. The emperor might appear at the kathisma, the imperial box above the hippodrome, raised high, flanked with golden screens, draped in purple, and equipped with its own private incense burners and snack table. You've never actually seen the snack table, but you've heard stories, something about sugared almonds and rose petal jam, that makes even the highest-ranking nobles contemplate minor treason. The trumpets sound again, this time 3 notes. That's a signal. Not for war. For approach. You make your way back along the stone path toward the inner passage that leads to the kathisma. The wind brushes your robe open slightly and you quickly fix it. Exposing too much ankle in this setting could be interpreted as either flirtation or heresy. Hard to say which is worse. A rustle ahead. 2 eunuchs glide past, their expressions perfectly unreadable. You catch a glimpse of something shimmering behind them. Gold. Definitely gold. Your heart skips a beat. Not from excitement, but from pure ritual anxiety. You're not even doing anything wrong, but this is Byzantium. Doing nothing wrong is still suspicious. You arrive at the edge of the kathisma, and then he appears. The emperor, tall, or maybe just wearing well-constructed sandals, draped in the long ceremonial robe, a waterfall of deep purple silk that trails behind him like a comet of wealth and low-grade insomnia. You can't see his face clearly. No one can. That's the point. His head is slightly tilted down, framed by a golden embroidered hood. A small, jeweled cross dangles at the edge of his cowl, and there stitched along the hem of the robe are the dreams of a kingdom. Literally, scenes from scripture, animals that don't exist. Possibly a very small illustration of an imperial cat named Leo. Scholars still debated. A gust of wind hits and the robe flutters. The crowd gasps, not at anything specific, just at the sheer majestic flappiness. And then silence. He raises his hand, not in greeting, but in that timeless imperial gesture that means both I hear you and please stop yelling about cheese. The faction's quiet. Even the horses down below seem to sense something has shifted. You watch as he stands there, motionless, a symbol, a presence. A man in very expensive pajamas reminding everyone that he is both awake and chosen. And slowly you feel your breath match the hush of the crowd. You sway slightly. The breeze hums, the silk shimmers, and in that moment, in that exact sliver of history, you forget what lap the chariots are on. You forget the factions, the figs, the slogans. You only remember the robe, the hush, and the sense that here in Byzantium, even standing still is a deeply political act. You close your eyes for a moment longer than you meant to, and you begin to dream in purple. You're back inside now, though you don't remember exactly when you re-enter the palace. That happens here. Time folds inward like a badly copied manuscript, paragraphs lost, meanings blurred. You might have passed through 2 courtyards, 3 velvet curtains, and a hallway that smelled faintly of nutmeg and wet stone. Or maybe you only blinked. And now, before you hangs a robe. Not just a robe. The robe. The imperial one. The real deal. It floats ever so slightly on a perfectly measured draft of air from a nearby window. One opened precisely at the 9th hour for ventilation and divine symbolism. You wouldn't dare touch it, of course, but you stand close enough to hear the faintest rustle of its embroidery when the breeze rolls across it like a whisper. It is purple, not lavender, not plum. Imperial purple, the kind of purple that comes from the murex snail extracted drop by tedious drop in a process so labor-intensive, so excruciatingly expensive, that just producing enough dye for 1 garment cost more than the average vineyard. 1 tunic, 1 estate. That's the math. And yes, the Byzantines were absolutely serious about it. In fact, under Roman and then Byzantine law, only the emperor could wear this specific shade. Anyone else caught sporting the look, let's just say, their fashion sense would be the least of their problems, so you stand there staring. The hem glitters with real gold thread, woven so tightly into the fabric, it looks like someone bottled sunlight and embroidered it into waves. Along the sleeves, tiny images of saints with eyes that follow you, and hands lifted in various gestures of blessing or, depending on your angle, mild judgment. You notice, tucked just inside the collar, a lining of what appears to be silk from China. Real silk. Not the local blend, but the ultra-fine imported kind. Which means this robe has traveled farther than most people ever will, across deserts, mountains, and enough bureaucracy to flatten an entire generation. Behind you, someone whispers, "They say the emperor wore that at the festival of the Holy Cincture." You nod slowly, pretending you know what that is. You don't. No one does, but it sounds extremely official and faintly uncomfortable. You glance around. The room is quiet, save for the gentle slap of sandals on marble as a servant brings in a brazier filled with heated olive oil. It's for moisturizing the robe, not the emperor. The robe. That's how serious things are here. To your right, a display stand holds an older garment, one of the unlaundered tunics. These were robes that were never washed, not because of neglect, but because they were considered holy, touched by ceremony, stained with sacred oils, not sweat. Although, let's be honest, lied probably both. This one smells faintly of frankincense, beeswax, and complicated hierarchy. According to court rumor, the robe has not been laundered since the reign of Heraclius, which makes it both a priceless relic and an olfactory challenge. You lean a little closer. The embroidery along the edges tells a story, probably of the emperor's victories, or maybe a parable about divine order. It's hard to tell. Byzantine art has a tendency to go from Christ calming the storm to angel battling sea creature while riding a lion with almost no warning. You hear someone behind you say this was the robe he wore when Constantinople repelled the Avar siege. You wonder if they say that about every robe. You hope they do. And yet, as you stare at it longer, a question creeps to your mind. How comfortable is it, really? I mean, sure, it's royal, it's divine, it's stitched with power and legacy. But can you sit cross-legged in it? Can you sleep on your side without unraveling a saint? You doubt it. You imagine the emperor late at night removing this garment thread by sacred thread. 7 assistants helping, each one trained in the art of silent disrobing. One misstep, and they might accidentally remove a sleeve meant to represent the hand of God. Underneath, a lighter robe, possibly his nightgown. Yes, there it is again, the nightgown, the emperor's final layer before sleep. According to one scroll you once glimpsed in the scriptorium, the nightgown is made of bleached linen soaked in rose water, trimmed with tiny gold bells that make no sound, just for show, just for tradition. You think about your own nightwear, a linen tunic, slightly itchy, probably missing a button, worn mostly because no one sees you after sundown. You feel for the 100th time, deeply underdressed. You walk around the robe on display, trying not to trip on the hem pooling like velvet fog at your feet. A cat appears from somewhere, gray, indifferent, absolutely royal in demeanor. You suspect she has more access to the imperial chambers than most nobles. She circles the base of the robe, sniffs it, and decides it's not important enough to deserve her attention. Then she vanishes again, as if exiting the scene of a dream. There's a ripple in the air. A page enters. He carries a small note on a wooden tablet. He reads aloud in a voice barely above a whisper. The emperor has requested his second tunic for post-evening court reflection. There is no confusion. Everyone knows what this means. The second tunic, the reflection one. Not for prayer, not for sleep, for standing alone in a candlelit room while pretending to contemplate fate, but mostly wondering whether he's left the stove burning in the imperial kitchen. It's made of a thinner silk, pale gold, with embroidery not just of saints and symbols, but of himself. Tiny images of the emperor at various life stages. A baby swaddled in purple, a young man holding a scroll, a slightly older man holding a slightly bigger scroll. This is what passes for self-care in Byzantium. And as the courtier disappears with the robe, you're left alone again in the chamber of imperial garments. Outside you hear the faint murmur of evening vespers. The The smell of oil lamps, warm and sooty, curls into the edges of your nose. You take one last look at the robe, the folds of history, stitched tight, the glittering thread that no one dares unpick. And for just a moment, it looks less like a garment and more like a spell, a cloth woven to hold together the illusion of power, belief, and one very tired man in very fancy pajamas. You step away, and the robe doesn't move, but somehow you feel like it watched you leave. The palace kitchens don't have doors so much as thresholds of temperature. You cross one now, and instantly you're swallowed by a thick, lazy warmth. Somewhere between the hug of a grandmother and the breath of a slightly overfed lion. It's morning, but not morning in the way the sun understands it. This is Byzantine morning, which means the bells have already rung, the incense is already burned, and someone somewhere has been lectured for stirring the honey clockwise instead of counterclockwise. And now it's time for the imperial breakfast. You're not the emperor, of course, but you're close enough to observe, quietly, reverently, like watching a sacred fish nap. The domesticos of the table gives you a subtle nod. That's permission. You may witness. You may stand in the corner and pretend you've always cared this much about porridge. The meal is modest, in theory. In practice, it's a carefully choreographed ballet of ceremonial hunger. First comes a small silver tray, carried by a eunuch whose expression could curdle milk. On it, a slice of barley bread, precisely scored down the middle, not to be eaten yet. That would be chaos. Then comes the bowl. Ah yes, the bowl. It contains something not quite porridge, not quite soup. More of a grain-based situation, suspended in warm goat's milk and vaguely blessed by nutmeg. No one knows its name, no one dares ask. It simply exists, steaming gently like it's been simmering since the Council of Chalcedon. You're told that the recipe changes daily, though the texture never does. Spoons are offered, not picked up, not yet. A short hymn is sung, 4 voices in tight harmony echoing softly against copper pots and centuries of ritual. You accidentally hum along, then panic. Did anyone notice? Probably not. You were humming in a key of heresy anyway. Finally, the emperor arrives, not marching, not sweeping, just arriving. He wears his morning robe, linen, soft, the color of muted sunlight. The hem is embroidered with small birds. One of them might be an eagle, one might be a duck. The artist was having an off day. He sits. The room holds its breath. A servant gently lifts the spoon and offers it, not directly into his hand. No, to the left of the bowl. Placed, weighted on. The emperor picks it up, and there it is, the first bite. No applause, no cheers, but the tension in the room drops by half. No choking, no face twisting. The emperor has accepted the breakfast. You are free to unclench your jaw. He eats slowly, deliberately, like each spoonful is being judged by God and his ancestors. Every now and then a scribe in the corner scribbles something down. You ask what, you are told, viscosity report. Next comes the egg, hard-boiled, but in the imperial style, which means it has been soaked in wine overnight and whispered to by a bishop. The shell cracks with a sound that somehow echoes. He does not salt it, he does not need to. The egg knows who it serves. You feel your own stomach rumble. You glance at the tray beside you. Plain figs, 2 olives, a cube of white cheese that might actually be soap. You nibble respectfully. You pretend it's divine. As the emperor eats, he gestures very subtly to a small side dish. A steward nods and removes it. You're told later it was a test dish, placed there to see if the chef understood metaphor. He did not. Then, unexpectedly, the emperor speaks. Too warm, he murmurs. No one reacts outwardly, but somewhere in the kitchen, a young apprentice chef faints. Another reevaluates his entire relationship with heat. You watch as the emperor finishes the last bite of the unnamed porridge. The bowl is lifted away like a sacred object. The spoon is wiped clean with a cloth embroidered with verses from the Psalms, not the whole Psalms, just selected moods. And then the final element is brought out, the morning water. This isn't just hydration, this is ceremony. The water has been drawn from a specific well in the northern gardens, filtered through linen blessed during Epiphany and chilled by placing it next to a marble statue of St. Theodore for exactly 12 minutes. The emperor lifts the cup. It's not really a cup, it's a goblet, a gentle goblet, etched with vines and tiny lines that smile if the light hits just right. He drinks 3 sips, no more, no less. He sets it down, and breakfast is complete. There is no announcement, no fanfare. just the subtle shifting of bodies as everyone pretends they didn't just emotionally invest in a bowl of fermented barley. The emperor stands. He nods once to no one in particular and exits, robes swishing behind him like gossip you're not supposed to overhear but absolutely do. You remain still for a moment. The steam from the porridge still lingers in the air. Someone opens a window. The scent of morning, damp, and kitchen spice rolls in. You've witnessed the start of a day in Byzantium, and it began with a spoon, a simple act, wrapped in gold and meaning and 14 layers of protocol. And as you walk away, quietly slipping back into the hall, you wonder, what happens if he skips breakfast? Some say the empire itself begins to tremble, others say it just means the soup was off. But everyone agrees when the emperor eats, the empire breathes easier. And you, now drowsy and strangely full of second-hand barley, begin to feel your own breath slow. Because here in the silk-wrapped machinery of court life, even breakfast is an act of control, and that's somehow deeply calming. You're standing in the Chrysotriklinos now, the grand ceremonial hall of the great palace. Not just any hall, the hall. The room where titles are invented, alliances hinted at, and everyone tries to look interested while their legs slowly stop circulating blood. It's early afternoon. You can tell because the light filters through the high-arched windows and golden ribbons, just bright enough to make you blink, but not strong enough to cast actual warmth. It's the kind of light that seems to have passed through several layers of theology before reaching you. The hall smells faintly of beeswax, polished marble, and anxiety. Ahead of you, the imperial throne looms. A gold and ivory construction that looks deeply uncomfortable to sit on. Less like furniture, more like a very expensive dare. It's mounted on a platform of 7 steps, each one representing something no one quite remembers, but which you are definitely not allowed to question. The emperor isn't here yet, but you are, and so are 46 officials, 23 ceremonial guards, and a small choir who hum lightly in the background just in case the room gets too quiet. Everyone is standing. No one sits. No one would dare. Not unless their name ends in Porphyrogenetos and they were literally born in the purple chamber. And even then, maybe not. You shift your weight from foot to foot, subtly, like a dancer in denial. Next to you, a courtier coughs, not a sick cough, a political cough. One that says, I have been here for 2 hours, and I'm still relevant. Across the room, someone else responds with a throat clear. Not to be outdone, this is court, and everything counts. The door's open, you feel it before you see it. The tension, the stilling of breath, the microscopic adjustment of posture. And then he enters, the emperor. Today, he's wearing his afternoon robe. Yes, that's a thing. You are absolutely right to sigh. It's a luxurious hybrid between the formal morning wear and the more relaxed evening gown. A garment that says, I still have authority, but I might nap later. It's blue today, deep dusk blue, embroidered with golden fig leaves and small radiant stars. The stars represent imperial destiny, or the emperor's fondness for staying up late. Hard to say. The imperial sandals, soft leather, half-dyed crimson with straps crisscrossing all the way up to the mid-calf, whisper against the marble floor. You once heard that one strap is looser than the rest to symbolize humility, or because the shoemaker had a twitch, he ascends the 7 steps. Slowly, majestically. You resist the urge to count. At the top he pauses. Everyone bows, just slightly. You're not allowed to bend too low. That would suggest servitude. Not enough, and it's arrogance. There is a precise, choreographed, acceptable bow angle. Somewhere between polite curiosity and mild lower back strain, the emperor sits. The room exhales. You glance at the great chamberlain, who gives a subtle nod to begin the ceremony. You don't know what today's agenda is. No one does. Sometimes it's about grain distribution. Sometimes it's about reassigning a bishop because he fell asleep during a hymn. A page steps forward with a scroll. He reads. His voice is high, practiced, and slightly nasal. Every syllable drawn out for dramatic emphasis, like a bedtime story told by someone with too much power and not enough editing. The scroll concerns, well, it concerns something about the official order of standing for minor provincial governors. It's a deeply unimportant issue disguised as a crisis of faith and order. You do your best to listen. You fail. Your mind wanders. You think of the robe the emperor is wearing right now. Does it itch? Is he comfortable? You imagine him years ago, selecting the fabric sample with a fingerless glove and an exhausted sigh. The scroll continues. You hear phrases like, in accordance with sacred custom, with the utmost humility, and to avoid another incident like Thres. You have no idea what happened in Thres, but judging by the tone, someone stood in the wrong place. You notice a fly in the upper window, lazily bouncing between glass and golden mosaic. You envy it. It is not bound by protocol. Then a surprising sentence, and now the most pious emperor shall distribute small tokens of honor. Ah yes, the ceremonial coin distribution. This happens twice a month, sometimes more if there's a feast. The emperor hands out coins, numismata, struck with his image on one side, and either Christ or an aggressively symbolic bird on the other. You line up, everyone does. A slow procession toward the throne. You are 37th, you wait and wait. Each person receives their coin with a bow and a whispered phrase from the emperor, something like, serve with clarity, or beware the second scroll. No one knows what they mean. It's like fortune cookies, but imperial and mildly terrifying. Your turn. You step forward. The emperor looks at you, through you, past you, possibly into your soul. He hands you a coin. You receive it with both hands, as tradition dictates. You bow. Not too low. He whispers, do not trust the baker in Antioch. You nod like you understand. You don't, but you will never forget. You step back. The procession continues. Behind you, someone sighs in relief. Another person silently mouths, what did he say? You shake your head. Some things must remain mysterious. The coins clink softly in pouches, a sound like tiny thunder. And then at long last, the ceremony concludes. The emperor stands. Everyone bows. He exits, his robe gliding behind him like a shadow with a budget. And slowly, blessedly, people begin to disperse. You stagger back into the corridor, legs numb, mind foggy. Someone hands you a cup of cool water. You drink it as if it's a holy relic. Perhaps it is, because in Byzantium, even standing still for an afternoon is an act of ritual, and every silence is a statement. And now, as your heartbeat settles, and your coin glints softly in your palm, you realize you've survived the afternoon court session. Barely, and your reward, a whisper, a coin, and the creeping suspicion that something very important just happened, and you completely missed it. You're sitting now. No, wait, not sitting. Perching. That's more accurate, because no one really sits in the antechambers of the palace. They hover on the edge of benches designed by someone who hated comfort, and possibly people in general. The room is lit by a few high windows and an oil lamp that flickers in a way that feels both cozy and vaguely threatening. Somewhere, a pigeon coos, loudly and with intent. You suspect it outranks you. The object of your attention is directly ahead. The imperial crown, or rather the ceremonial diadem, since calling it a crown is apparently far too pedestrian for Byzantine taste. It's displayed in its own niche, resting on a cushion of indigo velvet. No glass, no rope barrier, just a general understanding that if you so much as sneeze in its direction, you'll disappear faster than a tax exemption. It is massive, not in a cartoonishly oversized way. Not like something a birthday clown would wear. This is a crown with presence. It's wide, solid, rimmed with pearls, the kind of weight that reminds you constantly that you are the most important man in the world, but also that your neck will pay for it. The central band is gold. Real gold, not gilded. Thick, unbending, and etched with verses in Greek, some of which are prayers, others possibly recipes. Scholars still argue about it. Set into the gold are sapphires the size of your thumbnail, and a single red garnet in the front that legend says was pulled from the tomb of St. Polycarp, or maybe from a merchant in Alexandria. Either way, it glows. Above the band, tiny chains dangle, threads of gold with pearls and miniature icons at the end, all positioned to hover right in front of the emperor's eyes when worn. Not enough to blind him, just enough to constantly remind him that heaven is watching, and probably judging his haircut. You once heard a rumor that an emperor sneezed while wearing the diadem and knocked loose a sapphire. He spent the next 3 weeks in a monastery, repenting for jostling divine symbolism. A hush falls over the room. He's coming. You stand instantly, reflexively. Your knees don't even complain anymore. They've given up all hope of being treated well in this lifetime. The door opens and the emperor enters. Today, he's not wearing purple. He's in ceremonial white, a color worn for specific feasts and high rituals, as well as any day he wants to look like a very stylish cloud. The robe is stiff with embroidery. Gold threads form interlocking crosses. Tiny doves flit across the sleeves. You briefly wonder if they symbolize peace, or the fact that palace doves are terrifying and territorial. At his side, the master of the imperial wardrobe, a man who has not blinked since Pentecost. He carries the crown on a pillow of red velvet, both arms extended as though presenting an infant made of weight and pressure. The emperor steps forward and pauses. Everyone in the room is silent now, even the pigeon. You watch as the master raises the crown and two attendants gently place it on the emperor's head. Not dropped, not lowered, installed, like a priceless chandelier being positioned in a room of egos. The crown settles. The emperor's expression does not change, but you know he feels it. Everyone does. The shift in energy, the sudden transformation from man to symbol, from person to projection. He straightens, the pearls dangle. The garnet catches a beam of light and flares like a tiny volcano. He walks, slowly, deliberately, with the posture of someone who has just remembered they are technically the earthly representative of divine order. You follow, not closely, not too far. The distance of a respectful observer, the kind of person who notices history as it happens, but doesn't get in the way. As he enters the next chamber, lined with golden mosaics, echoing faintly with the clink of ceremonial chains, the weight of the crown becomes obvious. Not just to him, to everyone. You remember an old saying, a crown is not worn on the head but on the spine. That feels true. There's a tremble in your neck just watching him hold it up. And yet he moves with ease, or more accurately, with practiced discomfort, because nothing in Byzantium is easy. Everything is layered, every object heavy, every gesture ancient. It is believed that wearing the crown too often could lead to madness. It is also believed that not wearing it enough could lead to rebellion. Balance, that's the word. Even the crown is a lesson in restraint and control. Too much pride, you're a tyrant. Too little presence, you're forgotten. Too many pearls, you're, well, still the emperor, but maybe overdoing it. The ceremony concludes. The emperor steps back into the niche. Two attendants lift the crown from his head and return it to its cushion. You swear the garnet pulses once before it rests. He leaves, you remain. For a moment, the room feels lighter. Your own head tilts slightly. You imagine the weight, the pressure, the constant presence of symbolism directly above your eyebrows. And then with a shiver, you let the thought drift away because you don't wear the crown. You just carry its memory, and your neck thanks you for it. It's late afternoon now, and the palace feels like it's holding its breath. The halls grow quieter, not empty, but padded, like everyone's footsteps have been muffled in anticipation. You're walking behind a silk screen heading toward the vestibule of repose, which is court speak for the fancy hallway where the emperor changes into his pajamas. Of course, they're not called pajamas, that would be far too straightforward. No, here they're referred to as the evening vestments of contemplative comfort, which, translated from Byzantine subtext, means royal nightwear. You reach the chamber. It's soft-lit, low-ceilinged, and smells of lavender, warm olive oil, and something sweetly herbal, possibly thyme, possibly incense, possibly regret. The walls are covered in heavy curtains the color of overripe figs. A cat is asleep in a basket. You suspect it has tenure. And then, hanging from an ivory hook, you see it. The emperor's pajamas. Not just any pair. The ceremonial evening robe, it's made of silk, of course. But not just any silk. Imperial bath-level silk woven so finely it could pass through a bishop's ring. The fabric is pale cream with undertones of gold that only show up under candlelight, like a secret known only to royalty and moths. Along the hem, tiny golden angels are embroidered in flight. Their wings shimmer with threads so delicate you wonder if they were spun by actual cherubs. Some look serene. One disturbingly seems to be holding a scroll labeled List of Enemies. Maybe it's a joke, maybe not. On the cuffs, small, discreet loops of red thread, not decoration. Those are gesture guides, stitched reminders to keep imperial hand movements dignified even while yawning. And the neckline, oh, the neckline. It curves just so, lined with a whisper of ermine. Not enough to be warm, just enough to remind you that this is not leisure. This is legacy. A eunuch stands nearby, polishing the sleep sandals. They're soft leather, dyed with crushed pomegranate skins for color, and lined with lamb's wool. The soles are thin, designed for gliding across polished floors without making a sound. You once overheard someone say the emperor could cross an entire corridor without his footsteps being heard, like an owl in a theology debate. Suddenly, there's a hush, a presence. He enters, the emperor, still in his afternoon robe, still upright, still very much ruling, but his eyes are softer now, not sleepy, just distant, like he's already halfway into the dream world, sorting through metaphors. Attendants approach, not hurried. Nothing in Byzantium hurries, except rumors. They begin the changing ritual. First, the outer robe is removed. It is folded precisely, placed in a cedar box, lined with psalm verses written on linen. Then comes the belt, unclasped, not unbuckled. Buckles are for generals. Next, the underrobe, revealed for just a moment, pale, sleeveless, and so sheer it's practically allegorical. And then, with the help of two assistants, the pajamas are presented. They are not slipped on, they are installed. Left sleeve first, then right. A third assistant adjusts the collar with a tiny silver comb. You don't know why, no one does. It's just part of it. Finally, the slippers. They are placed on the floor in silence. The emperor steps into them as if stepping into a sacred idea. Once dressed, he approaches a large mirror. It's not glass, it's polished obsidian. Dark, gently warped, imported from somewhere vaguely threatening. He looks at his reflection, then smiles. Not big, just a twitch, but it's there. The chamberlain steps forward and recites the evening attire acknowledgement. A short poem that goes something like, "Clothed in calm, the sovereign sets as sun to twilight soul forgets." It rhymes in Greek. You think, someone rings a tiny chime, the ceremony is complete. But the emperor doesn't leave yet. He walks slowly around the room, touching nothing, just drifting. You follow at a respectful distance, watching the silk ripple as he moves, watching how the golden angels flutter at the hem, how his sandals whisper secrets to the marble. This, too, is power. Not swords, not edicts, not fleets, but ritual rest. In Byzantium, to sleep is not surrender. It's a statement. It says, the world can wait, the empire continues. You wonder what he dreams about. Chariot races, tax reform. The pigeon you saw glaring at him during lunch, no one knows, only that his pillowcase is embroidered with the Chiro, the first two letters of Christ in Greek, and that his bed has 4 posts, 2 relics, and 1 hidden compartment with a small loaf of emergency bread. Because you never know. He leaves the room, you remain. The pajamas hang differently now, creased slightly, lived in, still holy, still imperial, just quieter. You sit finally, let your spine ease. And you think these people turn sleepwear into a theological symbol, and somehow it works. You find yourself in the Hall of Solemn Entry, which, despite its dramatic name, is mostly used for inspecting shoes. Not just any shoes, of course, the emperor's slippers. Yes, the very ones you saw him slide into last night, soft and pomegranate dyed, but those were just evening slippers. The kind worn for gliding past velvet curtains and pausing meaningfully near incense. This morning, he will require something different. Court slippers. For walking, for standing, for enduring 4 hours of public reverence while maintaining the posture of a man who absolutely isn't craving a nap. Before you, arranged in a precise semicircle on a raised marble platform, are 12 pairs of imperial footwear. Each pair has its own small cushion. Each cushion is embroidered with a different virtue. Temperance, justice, wisdom, and one that says moderate silence, which you're fairly certain is not a virtue, just a lifestyle suggestion. You're not alone. There are 6 attendants, each with their own polishing cloth and air of studied panic. The Master of Souls, yes, that's his actual title, paces slowly behind them like a bishop inspecting relics. His hands are clasped, his brows are furrowed, his sandals are frankly dusty. Hypocrisy lives among us. The slippers themselves are works of absurd devotion. 1 pair, dyed deep crimson, is embroidered with golden griffins mid-roar. Another is soft cream, with tiny pearls stitched around the edges in patterns resembling wind. You're told these are the autumn penance slippers, worn only on days of light repentance and fog. 1 pair is entirely gold, not gilded. Gold. Flexible sheets of hammered metal sewn into velvet lining. You once saw a bishop weep just from looking at them. Another set appears to be woven from silver wire and dyed threads. When the light hits just right, They shimmer like moonlight on troubled water, which is fitting because they were allegedly commissioned during a particularly tense naval treaty negotiation. And then you see them, the divine sandals, the slippers with the icon. You inch closer. The soles are thick, made of sandalwood and lined with silk. The uppers are dyed violet, not quite imperial purple, but close enough to suggest ambition. And on each toe, embroidered in perfect symmetry, is the face of St. John the Baptist, staring upward, not painted, not stitched from memory, but copied directly from a sacred mosaic, using gold and indigo thread, so fine it had to be spun by candlelight and prayer. They say the emperor commissioned these slippers after a dream in which John the Baptist told him, "Your toes are walking away from righteousness." Whether metaphor or divine fashion critique, the result was the same. No one knows how often the emperor wears them. Some say only during major fasts. Others say only when he feels unsure about a political decision. One particularly bold scribe once suggested he wears them when he's trying to impress foreign envoys with his holiness and arches. Of course, these sandals come with rules. You may not speak while looking at them. You must bow slightly if standing within 2 cubits. And you must never, ever ask who does the embroidery, because the answer is either a very secret nun or divine intervention. This morning, the emperor is scheduled to walk the Hall of Mirrors on the way to court. That means whichever pair he chooses must reflect dignity, spiritual depth, and excellent posture. You watch as the Master of Souls lifts a pair delicately, not the golden ones, not the pearl-studded ones. He lifts these cream slippers, soft, elegant, edged in rose gold thread. These are known as the slippers of tempered grace. They'll match the emperor's day robe, rumored to be a flowing pale green with a wide belt embroidered with psalms, including one that warns against hasty decisions made before breakfast. The chosen slippers are placed on a smaller second cushion. A servant rings a soft bell. That means they will soon be brought to the imperial dressing chamber. And just like that, the other 11 pairs are covered with cloth, as if to spare their feelings. You are ushered out, back into the corridor, and as you walk, you think, there are entire wars in this world fought without the care and precision of a single slipper choice in Byzantium. There are saints who never had as many rules as a pair of shoes, and yet it works. The symbolism, the embroidery, the layers of meaning, even the weight of sandalwood beneath an imperial heel. You pass a window. The morning light slants in, catching the edge of a mosaic. You think you see another slipper in it, a golden one, perched on a cloud. You blink. Gone. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, or maybe even heaven wants a better pair of shoes. You're standing in the outer hall of harmonious presence, a name that sounds peaceful until you realize it's where ambitious courtiers gather to practice the delicate art of silent enthusiasm. This is where the counselors, chamberlains, strategoi, palace scribes, and that one guy who always pretends to be more important than he is, wait for the emperor's morning procession, not to speak with him. Not even to be seen, really. Just to stand, supportively, like furniture, but with more political anxiety. And the secret currency in this room, the nod. Not a greeting nod, not a, "Hey there, how are you" nod. No, this is the Byzantine court nod. An expression of loyalty, approval, and strategic awareness, all compressed into a gentle dip of the head at a very specific angle. You practice it now, subconsciously. Too sharp, and it reads like sarcasm. Too slow and you look like you've nodded off. Just right, you might be noticed. And in this empire, being noticed is either a promotion or an invitation to quietly retire to a monastery. A courtier near you, a man with more rings than fingers, nods to another across the room. The other returns it ever so slightly, then turns back to the mosaic he's been pretending to study for 7 minutes. It's a dance of necks, really. You feel your own spine beginning to join in. Someone clears their throat. You all freeze. It's not the emperor yet, just the prefect of audience management, a man whose primary job is to say, "not yet," in 15 different tones. He walks the perimeter, correcting sleeve lengths and inspecting posture like a man born with a measuring stick for a soul. Belt one finger too high, he murmurs at someone near you. The courtier stiffens, adjusts, smiles the kind of tight, terrified smile that only occurs in proximity to both silk and politics. You return to your neutral expression, Calm, alert, vaguely holy. The court face. You were trained for this, not in words, just by watching others survive it. Finally a bell, a single, clean tone. The Emperor is on his way. You glance to the great bronze doors at the far end of the hall. They remain closed, but you can already feel the shift in air pressure, the kind of atmospheric change usually associated with storms or particularly disapproving saints. The doors open, slowly, deliberately, and there he is, the Emperor, wearing his day robe of state reflection, a flowing garment of green and cream with wide sleeves embroidered with vines and birds that may or may not be doves. His sash reads in manus to us, in gold thread so fine it could have been spun by a whisper. Behind him, 2 attendants carry scrolls. Another holds a reliquary. One more is gently fanning the space behind his head, not him, just the air around him. You assume this is either symbolism or very advanced temperature control. He walks the hall slowly, every step measured, every eye lowered, and here's where the real ceremony begins. The nodding. As he passes each person, they bow their heads just a touch, just enough. You do it too, tilt, pause, rise. He doesn't nod back. Of course he doesn't. He's the Emperor. He is beyond reciprocal head movements. But he sees. Oh, he sees. Sometimes his gaze lingers, sometimes it flits. And when it pauses for even a heartbeat longer on someone, that person usually disappears into a new position, a new post, or never appears again. The court calls it the gaze of advancement. Others call it the divine shrug. No one agrees, but everyone nods. You catch his eye for a fraction of a second. You nod. Not too low, not too fast. He says nothing. He walks on. Your heart continues beating. Congratulations once he's passed. Everyone holds still until the bronze doors close again. No one moves. Not yet. That would be impetuous. Only when the prefect coughs, softly, politely, do shoulders relax and knees subtly tremble. You did it. You stood. You nodded. You survived. But of course, the tension never really leaves. You've now entered what courtiers call the ripple hour, where nods continue in his absence, now directed at each other. Thank you, nods. I saw you get looked at, nods. One day I will have a hat like that, nods. You step aside as 2 nobles engage in what can only be described as a full-length eye and neck ballet. One bows, the other nods. The first nods lower, the second tilts slightly while adjusting his cloak. This continues for a full 22 seconds. You time it. You are both impressed and deeply exhausted, and that's the beauty of it. In Byzantium, even doing nothing takes effort. Stillness is a performance. Silence is an offering. And the nod is everything. By now you've nodded so many times your neck has quietly filed for independence. You don't blame it, but you smile, faintly. Because here, among silk-robed figures and sacred glances, this is power. This is diplomacy, played out in vertebrae. And as you step into the next chamber, your spine slightly stiffer, your chin a fraction more deliberate, you think to yourself, next time, maybe I'll add a slight eyebrow twitch. That could be worth a promotion. You're standing now at the edge of the Pharaoh's chamber, a room designed to impress foreign dignitaries, intimidate lesser nobles, and, most importantly, keep people mildly uncomfortable at all times. Why? Because it's cold. Not drafty cold, not bring a shawl cold. This is the officially sacred chill of the Byzantine court, engineered, curated, and absolutely intentional. The walls are made of pale marble, veined with gold and green, polished to a level that makes your eyes slightly ache. High above, a dome ceiling, glittering with stars of mosaic tesserae, gives the illusion of a frozen night sky. And beneath your sandals, a floor so cool your toes feel judged. This is the room where the imperial throne resides. Not just a chair, not just a seat of power, but a contraption of theology and metallurgy. And it sits there now in the very center of the room, under the silent shimmer of golden stars and celestial frost. You approach slowly. The throne is made of solid gold, inlaid with pearls, sapphires, and tiny images of saints, each one frowning with varying degrees of spiritual concern. The armrests are carved to resemble lions, not stylized lions, very realistic lions that look they might whisper legal advice at midnight. And yes, the throne is cold too. It's placed on a dais of black granite, like raised by 3 steps. A subtle nod to the Trinity, or perhaps just an effort to keep the Emperor above the worst drafts. No cushion, because comfort apparently is for the unordained. The air around the throne is carefully maintained. Small bronze vents, hidden among the marble patterns, ensure a steady stream of air from the lower colonnades. And according to palace records, those vents were originally designed not to cool the room, but to keep the emperor's sweat from appearing in public, because in Byzantium, perspiration is not befitting of the sacred ruler. If you sweat, you suffer. If the emperor sweats, it's a doctrinal issue. You glance toward a discreet alcove near the eastern wall where a small fire crackles behind a grill. Not to warm the room, no, that would be heresy. It's there to warm the ink of official scrolls. Priorities. You aren't alone. The Protovestiarios, keeper of the wardrobe, enters with 2 attendants. They carry the winter overrobe, just in case the emperor begins to feel the chill too deeply. The overrobe is made of dark velvet, lined with a material described in court documents only as cloud hide. No one knows what that is. You assume it's either mythical or extremely unethical. A bell chimes. That means he's coming. Everyone arranges themselves. Sleeves are smoothed, necks are straightened. A few courtiers discreetly roll their shoulders like they're preparing for a group painting. The doors open, slowly. You stop being surprised by that. And the emperor enters. He walks slowly, his footsteps muffled by the chill. Today, he wears the throne robe, a heavy garment embroidered with a scene from the Ascension, Christ rising, apostles gesturing vaguely upward, and one angel off to the side, looking slightly over it. The emperor ascends the 3 steps, and he sits. Yes, sits. It's the only time you ever see it happen in full public view. And it's not just sitting, it's a revelation, a declaration that the man is not just ruler, but axis. The throne is not a chair, it is a position in the universe. And it's cold. You see the tiniest tremor in his shoulders, just a flicker, but he controls it. The overrobe is not summoned. He will endure, because the chill is part of the image. It says, I am above warmth. I am above fatigue. I am set apart. And if he happens to catch pneumonia, that's between him and the Archangel Michael. A dignitary from the Armenian court steps forward. He bows. He speaks. You understand none of it. Too many formal greetings, not enough nouns. But the tone is clear. I acknowledge your frost-covered magnificence. The emperor does not reply, he gestures. A scribe reads his response from a scroll. It's in Greek, flourished, poetic, possibly threatening. The Armenian smiles politely. You suspect he's thinking about warm soup. You glance around. Everyone else in the room maintains the illusion of absolute composure, but you can see it in their eyes. The slow tightening of jawlines, the subtle rub of a palm against a chilled forearm, the 1,000 little ways the human body says, why must diplomacy always be freezing? The emperor rises. 2 steps forward. 1 pause. He raises his hand. The room bows. And then he turns. Robes trailing like ice melting in reverse, and exits the chamber, leaving behind only the sound of wind slipping through those sacred vents. You're dismissed soon after. You step back into the hallway and the warmth hits you like a miracle, or possibly a sin. You're not sure anymore. You exhale. You flex your fingers and you realize the cold wasn't just ceremonial, it was strategy. Because when you're freezing, you're silent. You don't argue. You don't plot. You nod. You obey. You revere. And as you walk away from that throne of golden frost, you know, in Byzantium, even temperature is political. Even comfort is a choice. And power is best served cold. You're in the imperial bedchamber, though calling it a bedroom feels like calling the Hagia Sophia a cozy little chapel. No, this is more like a cathedral built for sleep, designed not just for rest, but for theatrical repose. The kind of sleep that sends a message, a sleep that says, I am chosen by God and also extremely well padded. The air is hushed and still, like even the dust particles know they shouldn't speak above a whisper. Your sandals barely make a sound on the onyx floor, each tile veined with green and silver, chilled to the touch and allegedly imported from a mountain no longer on maps. Along the walls hang curtains upon curtains, not for privacy but for layered symbolism. Every fabric has a meaning. One is dyed with mulberry for divine wisdom. One is embroidered with wheat for prosperity. One might just be there to cover a stain. At the center of it all, the imperial bed. It rests on a raised platform, 4 steps high, because sleeping on the same level as your subjects would, of course, be deeply inappropriate. The bedposts are carved from ivory, inlaid with gold thread in swirling patterns that seem to shift in the candlelight. No one can remember who made it. Some say angels, some say monks with nothing to lose. The mattress is rumored to be stuffed with a blend of eagle down, compressed rose petals, and linen scraps from the Shroud of Turin. Probably a rumor, probably. But what catches your eye are the 17 layers of curtains that surround the bed. Yes, 17. Each one serves a purpose. The outermost is thick velvet, dyed the color of late twilight, embroidered with stars and threads so fine you're told it was whispered into existence. The second is translucent silk meant to let in the moon, but not the sin. The third contains sacred texts sewn into the hem, tiny, tight Greek letters that loop and curve like a lullaby written by a theologian with trust issues. And so it continues, layer after layer, until you reach the innermost veil. White linen, soaked in lavender and rosewater, changed every 3 nights under supervision from the court of aromatic purity. This is not just a bed, this is a sleeper cell of holiness. You move closer, a servant gently pulls back one layer, just one, and you glimpse the sheets. They shimmer, not from wealth, not from thread count, from blessing. A bishop anointed them during Epiphany, another read psalms over them during Lent, and every 3rd Tuesday, a very old nun simply sits beside the mattress and hums softly until sunrise. You are not sure if this is for the emperor or the bed itself. A night pillow rests near the headboard, embroidered with the imperial monogram and filled, you're told, with linen fibers plucked only during the Feast of the Ascension. The reverse side bears a tiny stitched warning. Do not flip. Divine order lies this way. Next to the bed sits a small stand holding a vial of sleep oil made from frankincense, cinnamon bark, and secrets, a wax tablet in case of nocturnal revelations, and a tiny bronze bell, which you're told is used not to summon servants, but to summon a specific dream interpreter stationed 2 floors below. You begin to understand. This bed is not just where the emperor sleeps. It is where he receives celestial updates, possibly negotiates with angels, and certainly contemplates which provinces are behaving disrespectfully. And yet, despite the grandeur, there's a strange comfort to it. Everything is intentional. Everything has its place. Even sleep, in Byzantium, is organized by ecclesiastical schedule. You hear a whisper behind you. The keeper of the bedchamber, a man whose face looks permanently pressed, enters with 2 assistants. They inspect the linens. One tests the pillow. Another lights a single night candle. A short, thick taper that burns slowly, silently, and always out by dawn. They nod. The bed is ready. The emperor will arrive soon. You step back. Through the layers of curtains, I have the candle's flame casts flickering shadows. Shapes that look like halos one moment and helmeted soldiers the next. You're not sure which is more accurate. Outside the chamber, the sun has disappeared behind the Sea of Marmara. The city exhales. The bells from the Blochernay district sound soft and far away. And here, within this velvet-draped sanctum, the most powerful man in the world will soon lie down, wrapped in symbolism, shielded by saints, and cradled by thread counted in prayers, not numbers. You leave the room in silence. The curtain falls behind you, and you think, if sleep is a sacrament, then this, without doubt, is its altar. You're walking now through the gynecium, the private quarters of the Empress, off limits to nearly everyone, except a few trusted attendants, a rotating circle of holy women, and today, improbably, you. Not that you're special, just quiet. And in Byzantium, quiet gets you everywhere. The space is unlike the rest of the palace. Where the outer halls echo with politics and incense, the gynecium hums with gentle ritual, low conversations, the rustle of silks, the click of ivory comb against hair. And now you're inside the chamber of reflection where the Empress begins her nightly preparation. She's not here yet, but her comb is. It rests on a marble pedestal flanked by 2 oil lamps and a bowl of rose water. It's shaped like a crescent moon, carved from white ivory, smoothed over time by years of reverent fingers. Delicate inlay work snakes across its back, fake vines, doves, and most notably, a tiny image of St. Helena holding the true cross. You walk closer. The comb is more than a grooming tool. It is a symbol, a statement. Even my hair knows the apostles. It's whispered that the comb was brought from Antioch in a chest lined with myrrh and verses from the Book of Psalms. Another rumor says it was a wedding gift from the emperor, although given his tendency to gift people obscure relics and entire islands, this seems almost too ordinary to be true. What you do know is this: no one else touches it. The Empress alone uses the comb each evening as part of a ritual that has remained unchanged for generations. The procedure is simple, in theory. 1. Hair is unpinned, gently, 1 clip at a time. 2. Rosewater is combed through the strands. 3. The ivory comb follows exactly 100 strokes, not more, not less. Each stroke is silent. Each stroke is a prayer, but not the loud theatrical kind you hear in churches. These are internal psalms offered not with the mouth but through the rhythm of repetition. The comb doesn't just straighten, it remembers. You glance at the silver hand mirror beside the pedestal. It's polished to a near blinding shine and engraved on the back with the phrase, "Beauty is discipline." It's unclear whether that's encouragement or a warning. And then she enters. The Empress. She moves like poured silk, deliberate, unhurried, certain of the space she occupies. She wears her evening robe, pale lilac trimmed with thread, so fine it glows. On her brow rests a circlet of moonstones, and her feet are bare, wrapped only in ribbons dyed with lavender, and something you can't quite name. Her attendants bow, not too low. She nods, only slightly. Her eyes meet yours for just a moment. You bow. She steps to the pedestal. Without a word, she removes the circlet. An attendant takes it. Another lifts her hair, which falls in quiet waves down her back, dark, thick, and absolutely perfect in a way that suggests divine agreement. She dips her fingers into the rosewater. You hear it, just barely, a soft drip like a secret being confessed. Then she lifts the comb and begins. 1 stroke, 2, 3. The chamber holds its breath. This is not vanity. This is order. This is the maintenance of harmony in the body, in the palace, in the empire itself. Because if the Empress's hair remains calm, neat, composed, then maybe the empire will too. At stroke 25, an attendant begins to hum. A single note, pure, constant. At stroke 40, another lights a small censer. The smoke spirals upward like a ribbon of incense-soaked memory. At stroke 70, the room smells of sandalwood, rose, and warmth. You feel your thoughts slow. At stroke 99, the Empress pauses, a breath. Then one final motion, deliberate, unhurried, like closing a book written in sighs. She sets the comb down, gently. It rests again on its pedestal, unchanged and yet somehow full. She says nothing. She doesn't have to. She stands. The ritual is complete. The empire is still. She turns to leave, pausing just long enough for the trailing edge of her robe to brush lightly across the floor, like a closing curtain at the end of a sacred play. And then she's gone. You remain. The comb gleams in the lamplight, and you think, in Byzantium, even brushing your hair is an act of statecraft. And the empire, it's smooth, unknotted, and utterly silent. You find yourself now just outside the chamber of anointing, a space tucked deep within the palace like a secret folded into silk, used only in the evenings, only by the emperor, and only when the stars align in a way that someone, somewhere has declared spiritually optimal. It's not a large room, not grand, not gilded, but dense, with scent, with memory, with ritual. The door creaks softly as it opens, and immediately you're swallowed by warmth. Not just temperature, but a heavy, slow-moving warmth that clings to the skin and smells like history trying to relax. You step in. The walls are draped in layers of fabric dyed with saffron and deep blue, meant to represent fire and sky. A low ceiling makes the space feel close, cocoon-like, and at the center of it all is the anointing table. A smooth slab of polished black stone, curved slightly like the back of a sleeping animal. This is where it happens, the evening unction, a quiet ritual known to few, performed by fewer, and understood by almost no one. Here's what you know. Each evening, after court is dismissed and supper, a depressingly bland affair involving lentils and a small cheese cube, is cleared away, the emperor comes here to be anointed, not for illness, not for coronation, not for combat, but for rest. Because in Byzantium, even sleep has its own sacrament. The door behind you opens. Footsteps. Whispered sandals. He enters, the emperor, wearing his night tunic, a fine, sleeveless robe made from linen soaked in myrrh and lined with thread that allegedly belonged to a saint's pillowcase. His hair is loose, his crown is gone. He looks human, briefly. Then, Then the oil bearer steps forward. She's older than most of the palace, with hands like folded parchment and a voice that barely rises above silence. No one knows her name. She just is. She holds a small golden flask. You can smell it from here. The oil is a blend known only to 3 people. It contains crushed rose petals gathered at dawn during Pentecost, clove, frankincense, and something called the whisper root, which may not technically exist. It is warmed over a candle made from beeswax and scroll ash. The symbolism is unclear. The scent is divine. She dips her fingers into the oil and begins. A dab to the forehead, a line along each temple, a slow circle over the heart. She murmurs a prayer, not out loud, not in Greek or Latin, but in Byzantine breath speak. A series of exhalations designed to harmonize with the rhythm of the body and confuse any nearby demons. The emperor doesn't move. His eyes are closed. More oil. She anoints his wrists, tracing a loop around the veins, then his ankles, then, with a final, almost invisible motion, the center of each palm, as if to say, let even your grasp loosen while you sleep. The room is utterly still now. The oil glistens faintly under the low lamplight. The air feels thick enough to stir with a spoon. Then, without cue or announcement, she steps back, and the emperor exhales. Once, long and low, like a man letting go of everything that ever mattered. Scrolls, war councils, mosaic debates, sandal diplomacy. He is helped to a reclining bench, not a bed, never a bed, just a couch, covered in linen, carved with the 12 apostles. One of them, possibly Philip, looks surprised, which feels strangely comforting. There he will lie, eyes closed, oiled and holy, and temporarily free from the burden of being an icon with legs. You watch as the oil bearer caps her flask. Not tightly, just enough. A final scent curls in the air, soft, spicy, ancient, and you understand something now. The emperor doesn't just prepare for sleep, he descends into it, like Orpheus. But with better lighting, you step back through the curtain, the warmth lingers on your skin, and as the door closes behind you, muffling the flicker of flame and the weight of ritual, you whisper, just barely, "Good night, Majesty," and you swear. The oil answered. It's sometime past midnight, or maybe before dawn. You can't quite tell. In the Byzantine palace, time doesn't move so much as it glides, like a candle's shadow or a hymn stretched across marble. You're in a narrow corridor now, quiet and flickering, with low lamplight, headed toward the portico of vigilance, an unassuming walkway just outside the emperor's sleeping chambers. But tonight, it's not empty, because this is the hour of the night watchman, and he is already at work. You hear him before you see him, a low murmur, echoing down the stone walls, measured and rhythmic, not speech, not prayer. Recitation. You round the corner and find him there, a single cloaked figure standing beneath a tall candelabrum, holding a scroll in one hand and a wax tablet in the other. His eyes are focused, though he never glances down. He knows it by heart. He is reciting tragedy. Old Greek, Aeschylus, maybe. The words fall slow and heavy, syllables smoothed by centuries of ritual and sheer lack of audience. His voice is soft, not for drama, but for atmosphere. A slow river of vowels drifting under doors and into dreams. This is his task. He is the nocturnal reader. His job is not to guard, not to patrol, not even to report. He simply reads, all night, every night, for the emperor, not to entertain him, not to lull him, but to maintain the intellectual climate of the bedchamber. Yes, that is a real phrase you once heard a monk whisper with tremendous respect and a tiny eye twitch. The logic is simple, or Byzantine. The idea is that if the palace is filled with beautiful, sorrowful, contemplative language, then the emperor's dreams will be more orderly, his soul will remain steeped in wisdom, and, most importantly, the empire will not fall. No pressure. You lean against the wall, listening. The story tonight is tragic, of course. They're all tragic. Something about a cursed son, a misguided prophecy, and someone being stabbed with poetic irony. Standard fare. It's not the content that matters, it's the cadence. Every few lines, the watchman pauses to sip water, not from a flask, from a silver cup engraved with olive branches, refilled every hour by a eunuch who may or may not be asleep, standing up. As he reads, the wind brushes past the corridor, bringing with it the faintest scent of cedar and old vellum. You hear a faint creak behind the curtain. The emperor is stirring, or shifting, or perhaps simply listening. Because yes, he listens. He doesn't always sleep. Some nights he remains awake in bed, wrapped in 7 layers of ceremonial linen, his head resting on a pillow stitched with the apostles, eyes open to the ceiling while words drip down from the corridor like holy rain. He listens to tragedy. Because where lesser rulers drink wine to forget, the emperor bathes in sorrow to remember. The nocturnal reader continues. He doesn't rush, he doesn't yawn. His posture is impeccable, his voice stays at the same low, deliberate hum, equal parts lullaby and warning. You think of your own sleep habits. You once fell asleep to the sound of pigeons arguing outside your window and dreamed of dead and moderately cooked fish. The emperor, he dreams of fate, betrayal, and divine justice, all recited in dactylic hexameter. The reading shifts. Now it's a passage about a woman walking into the sea, carrying her shame in one hand and a silver comb in the other. The watchman's voice softens. You glance down the corridor. The flame wavers. The scroll trembles slightly in his hand, not from fatigue, but from the weight of the words. And for a moment you feel it too, the power of repetition, the comfort of tragedy, the strange, soothing grip of a sad story told just right. You wonder if the emperor has a favorite line. You wonder if he's heard this one 100 times. You wonder if he knows it by heart. And then the watchman stops. Not abruptly, he just lets the last word fall. Silence returns. Not total silence, but Byzantine silence. The kind that hums with unsaid prayers and the subtle sound of history keeping itself company. The reader kneels. He closes the scroll. You rest it on the stand with a reverence most people reserve for icons or birthday cakes. You feel your own breath slow, the candle flickers, the air cools, and in a room just beyond the curtain a man in silk sleeps under the influence of ancient grief and controlled meter. You turn to leave, footsteps quiet, and as you go the watchman's voice rises once more. A new line, a new lament, another thread of gentle sorrow to weave into the fabric of the night. You don't understand the words, not really, but you understand the feeling. And tonight, that is more than enough. The morning is soft. The sky, somewhere beyond the marble and mosaics, has begun to turn that quiet Byzantine blue, the color of eggshells, saints' robes, and minor miracles. You're walking through the cloister of dreams recorded, a narrow hall that curves gently around the emperor's private wing. You're not here for cleaning, or guarding, or polishing anything holy. You're here for the dreams. Because in Byzantium, dreams are not private. They are documents, divine communiques from the beyond, often with poor grammar and occasionally involving flaming goats. Every morning just before sunrise, the emperor's dreams are recorded by an official known only as the Noctographos. He is waiting for you now, seated at a low table covered in wax tablets and sharpened bone styluses. His expression is one of calm dread, like a man who has read too many visions involving celestial fish and metaphorical staircases. You bow. He nods once and gestures toward the curtain of post-reverie. Beyond it, the emperor reclines, not fully awake, not fully asleep, wrapped in soft linen, hair slightly tousled, eyes half-lidded as if still negotiating with the dream. The emperor's hand is resting on his chest, fingertips twitching gently as if conducting a hymn only he can hear. The Noctographos clears his throat, softly with grave respect. "My lord," he murmurs, "if your majesty recalls the dream." The emperor speaks, slowly, sleep-wrapped. It is not a story, not at first, it's images. A staircase, but each step was made of bread. A mirror that only reflected my sandals, 3 bishops singing, but the song was just my name, repeated endlessly. The Noctographos scratches rapidly, stylus slicing across wax. You move to the side, standing by the wall where sunlight is just beginning to touch the stone. You've never heard a dream like this before, but apparently he has one every night. Sometimes it's prophetic, a foreshadowing of floods, invasions, or inconvenient taxes. Sometimes it's symbolic, his mother turning to a grapevine or a lion reciting a marriage contract. Sometimes, like this morning, it's confused, oddly detailed, and absolutely sacred. The emperor continues. There was a well. I leaned over it, but I saw Constantinople inside, smaller, spinning like a coin on its edge. The scribe hums. This is a good sign. When he hums, it means the dream might be interpreted favorably. Something about coin-shaped cities is always promising. And then the emperor pauses. There was a voice, he says, but it was speaking in pastry. Everyone is quiet. Even the scribe doesn't write that part down right away. He glances at you. You shrug. You're not trained in big theology. Still, it's recorded, because everything must be. In Byzantium, dreams are not for interpretation alone, they're for governance. If the emperor dreams of rain, grain stores may be increased. If he dreams of silence, a bishop may be relocated. If he dreams of turtles, that gets complicated. You watch as the noctographos carefully smooths a layer of wax and presses the stylus with the final phrase. Interpretation to follow pending ecclesiastical review. Standard. The emperor reclines deeper into his pillows. An attendant offers him a spoonful of warm wine with clove. He nods but does not sip. He's still in between. You're motion forward now. You retrieve the dream tablets gently, reverently, as if they might sing or explode. You carry them to the outer room, where two monks wait in silence. They will take them to the office of oniric doctrine, where trained theologians will spend the morning parsing every stair, sandal, and pastry. They will argue. They will sigh. One will definitely accuse another of over-symbolizing the grapes. But by sundown, a report will be issued and a decision made. You pass a small window on your way out. The sky is pink now. Birds call faintly in the distance. Doves, probably. Or very enthusiastic spies. You glance down at your hands. The wax tablet is warm. The dream still lingers. You think of the emperor's voice. Low, calm, strange. A man half asleep and yet somehow more awake than anyone you've ever known. Because here in Byzantium, sleep is not an escape. It's a meeting. A policy session with God, a council of shadows, a prophecy whispered through dreams that smell faintly of cinnamon. You walk faster now. Someone needs to know what the sandals meant. And you, humble, silent, and slightly confused, have carried the message. Another day begins. The morning fog has rolled in from the Bosphorus like a lazy cat. Slow, persistent, and entirely uninterested in leaving. You walk along the covered balcony just beneath the Hall of the Augustae, the uppermost level of the palace complex where political whispers, religious tremors, and the occasional poorly timed cough ripple like seismic activity. The air is cool. The stones are damp. The curtains flutter gently in the mist, and the mood suspiciously quiet. A eunuch in gold-trimmed sandals glides past you without a word. Behind him, 2 pages carry a tray of covered dishes. One of them is wobbling slightly. You don't ask what's inside. You never ask. Because today, something is brewing. Not just tea, not just spiced lentil soup served with caution, but something intangible. And it's not just you. As you make your way toward the upper loggia, you hear them. Voices. Not raised, not frantic, but repetitive. Like arguments wrapped in velvet. You peek through a screen. Inside, a trio of officials in robes of fading maroon are deep in conversation. And the blue faction will not stand for another silence, one murmurs. Their silence is the protest. Another says, voice low. The green faction is already posting icons sideways, says the third, eyes darting to the door. That's a message. Ah, factions. You forgot. You shouldn't have. No one in Constantinople ever really forgets. The blue and green factions, what started as chariot racing teams centuries ago, has become a slow-burning political volcano, oozing influence and the occasional burnt bakery. Officially, they're athletic clubs. Unofficially, they are political engines, disguised as fan groups. And right now the Emperor is trying to navigate yet another mood swing in factional loyalty. Why? Because apparently someone in the treasury changed the dye supplier for the ceremonial ribbons. And the Greens are furious. No, really. They claim the new ribbons are too blue-leaning, and the Blues naturally have embraced this as a divine sign. One man in the bookbinder's quarter allegedly wrote an entire theological defense of the dye shift. His pamphlet was banned within the hour. So now you stand, half concealed by a velvet curtain, listening as grown men in golden belts argue about textile hues with the seriousness of a trial for treason, and that's when the mist outside thickens, as if summoned, the sound of steps on wet stone. You turn. A courtier approaches you, his beard perfectly combed, his face tight with protocol. He leans in, voice so soft it could be mistaken for a draft. The Emperor requests his mist-walking sandals. You blink once, then nod, because yes, of course, mist-walking sandals. They're real, and they're exactly what they sound like. Soft-soled, lightly oiled leather footwear that won't slip on damp marble, and are lined with fox fur for silent authority. They're stored in the chamber of contingent weather garments. You run, politely. You arrive, breathless. The sandals are ready, wrapped in a cloth-dyed gray-green, the color of early morning secrets. You bring them back in silence and hand them off to an attendant who smells faintly of myrrh and bureaucracy. The emperor will soon appear on the outer loggia, where he will walk exactly 13 paces through the mist, stare contemplatively at the horizon, and then issue a short, vague statement designed to be interpreted in at least 7 different ways. He will say something like, "The clouds do not move without cause," and half the city will interpret this as support for the blues, while the Greens will claim it's clearly an allusion to St. Menas and their grievances with the Ministry of Dye Affairs. Meanwhile, pigeons will coo, the mist will drift, and the Empire will lean in to listen, ears tilted, breath held. You make it back to the corridor just in time to see him emerge. The Emperor, in his gray robe of seasonal ambiguity, shoulders square, sandals silent, his hair is damp but regal. His posture says, "I have spoken, even if I haven't yet." He walks 13 steps, pauses, the mist curls around his ankles like respectful incense, and then softly, not all movement is progress, but some still must step forward. He turns, walks back. The court bows as if thunder had rolled through. You blink slowly. Somewhere behind you, a court scribe is already scribbling a treatise titled Imperial Moisture and the Political Body. Another is diagramming the emperor's pause length. You lean against the cold stone wall and exhale. Byzantium has survived another atmospheric crisis. And as the mist fades into day, you think even the weather has a faction. And the emperor, he walks between the raindrops in fox-lined shoes, an impossible silence. You're deep inside the west wing of whispered corridors now, the part of the great palace where the walls seem to lean in, where voices don't echo, they absorb. If something is going to be said in secret, it is said here. If someone's going to lose their title by accident, it's likely to begin with a sentence whispered near a tapestry of St. Andrew, looking slightly disappointed. But you're not here for whispers today. You're here for something far more bizarre. You're following a eunuch through a narrow hallway, lit only by oil lamps shaped like peacocks, heading toward a destination he's only called the Gallery of Footsteps and Forgotten Things. You ask no questions, you wouldn't get answers, you never do. And then suddenly you're there. You step through an arch draped in a faded red curtain, and what you see makes you pause. Shoes, lined up, dozens of them, no, hundreds. Row upon row, displayed behind glass, resting on pedestals, some suspended midair by threads of golden silk like strange, motionless birds. This is the Emperor's private shoe archive. No one speaks of it openly, but everyone suspects it exists. Some say it's a room of relics. Others call it a wardrobe shrine. One famously drunk historian once referred to it as Byzantium's most dangerous weapon. You don't laugh anymore. A placard beside the door reads, "Let none forget the path walked, nor the soul that bore the burden." You walk slowly past the displays. The first row is practical. Court sandals from his youth, narrow, undecorated, but worn just enough to suggest intentional asceticism. The left one has a patch, not because of damage, because the Emperor insisted it be visible to remind him of the slipperiness of virtue. Next comes the ceremonial section. Ah yes, slippers worn during the Palm Sunday procession, stitched with real palm leaves, flattened under glass now, slightly crumbling. A pair made from crushed lapis, worn only once because they caused unacceptable celestial alignment discomfort. One reportedly emitted a faint hum. And then, the strangest display yet, you stop in front of it. A single pair of leather sandals, scuffed and plain, perched atop a plinth, draped in imperial purple. The plaque below simply says, "The Walk of Mistaken Identity." You remember this story? Everyone does. It's a quiet scandal whispered during wine-soaked dinners. One year, a minor official wore these exact sandals by accident on the same day the Emperor was scheduled to walk through the South Gate of Triumph. The sandals, having been made by the same royal cobbler, were indistinguishable from the Emperor's. So when the man passed a small crowd of palace guards, they bowed. Some even chanted, he bowed back. History is unclear on whether he did it on purpose. Either way, the sandals were confiscated immediately and now sit here, in shame or glory. No one knows. You look around. The room is oddly quiet now. There's a faint draft carrying the scent of cedar, myrrh, and leather oil. Then from the far end, a small alcove catches your eye. Behind a velvet rope sits a mirror, but not just any mirror. Its frame is carved into the shape of sandals, 24 of them, each representing a different emperor's reign. Some are gilded, some cracked, one is upside down, and in the reflection you catch something strange. You, wearing different shoes. Not physically, but visually. The mirror shows you in a pair of the emperor's slippers. You blink, step closer. No change. In the mirror, you stand a little taller. Your back straightens. Your eyes gleam with theoretical diplomacy. You look imperial, then you look down. Your real shoes, plain, serviceable, mildly damp, stare back at you in judgment. You step away. Too long in front of that mirror and you might start believing things. Ambitious things, dangerous things. Just ask the man from the mistaken identity story. You leave the alcove, and as you exit, you catch one last glimpse of a pair of sandals tucked into a niche high on the wall. Dusty, unlabeled, almost forgotten, but not quite. You wonder, did the emperor walk in them? Or are they waiting for the day he must walk again? Because in Byzantium, even the shoes have destinies, and every step is a chapter no one's quite finished writing. It's almost evening now, and the palace is beginning to dim. Not just the light, but the whole tempo of existence. The incense burns lower, the footsteps soften, the whispers lean toward poetry. You walk a familiar corridor, the mosaic tiles beneath your feet flickering with golden light as oil lamps are lit one by silent attendants. You're heading toward the chamber of correct repose, a rarely mentioned space. Some say it's a myth. Others say it's a punishment, but you know the truth. It's the room where the emperor learns to sleep properly. Because yes, in Byzantium there is a correct posture for imperial slumber, a right way to rest, a holy geometry of the spine, a sacred method of shutting one's eyes without insulting heaven or orthodoxy. The rules were set centuries ago by a bishop with back problems and a dangerously creative streak. You step inside. The chamber is dim, lined with soft cloth and alternating panels of deep blue and honey gold. There are no icons here, just a single painted line on the eastern wall, pointing slightly upward to help orient the sleeper's head toward Jerusalem. Or maybe it's toward the treasury. No one's entirely sure anymore. In the center, a wooden frame bed, low to the ground, with a thin mattress stuffed with goose feathers and the disappointment of minor heresies. Wow, there's a figure on the bed. The postural instructor, an older man, lean as a walking reed, wearing a robe so wrinkle-free it looks ironed by divine light. He carries no scroll, no staff, just a long, flat ivory ruler, used exclusively to correct spiritual slouching. He turns to you. The emperor will arrive shortly, he says, not whispering, but not exactly speaking. It's a tone only monks and extremely patient tutors can maintain without bursting into song or flames. You nod. A servant enters next with the alignment cushion, a rectangular linen sack embroidered with Psalm 4:8, the line that reads, "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." Except in this version, sleep is underlined in gold thread. Another brings in the feet equalizer, a footrest meant to ensure the emperor's legs lie at precisely the same angle. It's made of cedar wood and enforced obedience. Then the door opens, and the emperor enters. Tonight, he's dressed in his evening equilibrium tunic, a pale gray linen robe with wide sleeves and an embroidered hem bearing images of balanced scales, a well-plumbed cistern and St. Joseph looking suspiciously symmetrical. He nods once, everyone nods lower. Then the process begins. The postural instructor gestures toward the bed. The emperor sits, slowly, the mattress barely shifts. Then, following a sequence known only to 3 living people, he, 1, lowers his right side first. 2, places his left hand across his chest. 3, aligns both feet atop the equalizer. 4, lets his head rest on a pillow carved with the image of a level. You watch as the instructor moves around him making microscopic adjustments, shifting his shoulder by a finger's width, rotating his left foot half a degree, gently nudging his chin so that it points not at the ceiling, but toward the higher ceiling of the soul, their words, not yours. Then comes the final inquiry. The instructor asks softly, "Does your majesty feel the peace of proportional stillness?" The emperor answers after a beat, "I feel centered." This is the goal, not rest, not sleep, but centeredness. Because in Byzantium, to lie down crookedly is to invite chaos into your ribs. To sleep with one shoulder higher than the other is to dream false dreams. To drool is borderline theological misconduct. And so he lies there, perfectly aligned, breathing evenly, a living icon of repose. The instructor steps back, clearly pleased. His face softens, just a little. Someone dims the oil lamp by pinching it with a cone of silver mesh. The scent of beeswax and myrtle lingers. And you, still in the doorway, unnoticed but not unimportant, you marvel because you've seen emperors fight wars. You've seen them wrapped in silk, ringed by candles, shadowed by chants. But this delicate alignment of vertebrae and divinity, feels more powerful than all of it. You step back quietly, the door closes. Behind it lies a man not just resting, but reigning from beneath a linen sheet, held in place by geometry and grace. And outside, the empire continues, not with clamor, but with balance. You're awake earlier than usual, not because of bells or summons, but because something has shifted in the rhythm of the palace. A kind of hush, a sense of anticipated oddity. The sky is still pale, the sun not yet fully committed, and the air smells like candle smoke and laundry. You're summoned to the chamber of proxy slumber, an annex just off the Empress's private corridor. A place so rarely mentioned that most palace staff assume it's a closet for oversized censers or retired relics. But today it's occupied by 5 men, each in identical linen robes, and they're sleeping, all of them, on 5 identical beds, perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, perfectly awkward. Welcome to one of Byzantium's strangest secrets, the imperial sleep doubles. Yes, people paid to sleep on behalf of the emperor. You try not to let your face show disbelief, but the attending official, dressed in dark blue and wearing the insignia of the logothete of restful substitution, catches your expression anyway. He clears his throat with bureaucratic grace. You see, he says, gesturing toward the sleepers, His Majesty must be preserved from certain risks, unstable pillows, over-firm feathering, improper thread count. It would be most unfortunate. You nod slowly like that explains everything. These 5 noble volunteers, he continues, are tasked with testing His Majesty's bedding in rotation for firmness, warmth, dream clarity, consistency. You blink. Oh yes, the logothete adds, walking toward a desk covered in wax tablets and silk ribbon bookmarks. Each subject records their dreams, in detail. Any mention of fire, water, goats, or citrus must be flagged immediately. You look over his shoulder. Indeed, one wax tablet reads, dreamed of a goat staring at an oil lamp. Lamp blinked twice, goat sang the Sanctus in a minor key, unclear emotional effect. Another reads, felt warm, cloud texture, no imperial imagery, recommend refluffing of central pillow quadrant. You want to laugh, you do, but then you remember, this is Byzantium, where dreams are doctrine and pillows can inspire policy shifts. The sleepers groan faintly, one turns over. A scribe immediately rushes in and notes unsanctioned shift at second watch. Another adjusts the blanket's corner with the precision of a cartographer. These beds, the logothete explains, are replicas of the emperor's own, every detail reproduced, down to the angle of the embroidered peacocks on the sheet trim. He lifts the sheet reverently. Yes, peacocks, tiny, golden, slightly menacing. You can't help but whisper, how long have they been doing this? He sighs, proudly, since the reign of Constantine's ascent, after a nightmare involving a dancing fish led to an ill-advised tax on flour. You nod solemnly, because of course it did. He walks you past the beds. One sleeper's breathing is slightly uneven. The logothete frowns and taps a small bell. 2 eunuchs appear and begin adjusting the mattress as if tuning a harp. These men, he says, are not merely substitutes. They are guardians of imperial repose. If the bed is wrong for them, it is wrong for him. A thought strikes you, but don't they ever get confused? He chuckles. Not often. But once, a sleep double woke believing he was the emperor, issued a proclamation about wearing 2 belts. It was brief. You pass a 6th bed. It is empty. You raise an eyebrow. He notices. That one is for emergency trials, he says. New thread patterns, alternative goose ratios, or, if needed, a double dream comparison study. You don't ask, because you're already processing too much. People are dreaming on command, reporting on dreams, sleeping in synchronized rotation to protect a man who already sleeps in 17 layers of anointed linen. And you are now witness to the Empire's sleep insurance policy. One of the sleepers suddenly sits upright, eyes wide. Everyone freezes. He whispers, "The Emperor must not use the purple bolster." I saw it turn to smoke. A scribe bolts from the room. The logothete turns slowly to you. "See, worth every solidus." You nod, because in Byzantium, sleep is a matter of state, and if the Emperor dreams poorly, entire cities may experience unrest. You step back into the corridor, mind spinning, and you think, I just met 5 men who professionally go to bed in shifts. And somehow, they might be the most important people in the palace. It's evening again. Not sunset, not yet, but that soft golden hour when shadows stretch just enough to remind you that time in Byzantium is ceremonial, not practical. You're walking through the south wing of leisurely spectacle, which is, on paper, where the Emperor enjoys recreation. And by recreation they mean 3-hour plays. No dialogue. Everyone whispering. Welcome to the court performance of sacred silence. What some call entertainment and others call a theatrical endurance test, with really nice costumes. The chamber is long, rectangular, and decorated in what could only be called imperial minimalism. The walls are marble, soft green veined, draped with thick velvet tapestries depicting fruit, not symbolic fruit, just fruit. Apples, pears, and one very passive-aggressive fig. A row of golden stools lines the eastern wall for high-ranking viewers. You are not on one of them. You stand in the viewing alcove beside a noble who has already fallen asleep with his eyes open. His breathing is too precise to be accidental. At the center of the room is a small stage, maybe 12 paces wide. There are no curtains, no props, just a tiled platform and the distant sound of a wind chime someone forgot to remove from the roof. And then the lights dim. Not by switch, not by command, but by ritual oil extinguishing. 3 servants dressed in identical beige robes gently snuffing out the side lamps one by one, as if tucking the room into bed. A courtier rings a tiny silver bell. The play begins, or rather it doesn't, because this is Byzantine court theater, and that means the first act is composed entirely of movement without words. A performer enters, dressed in a long tunic dyed storm gray, face painted with white ash, feet bare. He carries a bowl slowly, reverently. He places it at stage center. He leaves. Another performer enters. This one carries a tiny model of the Hagia Sophia made of wax. He walks a slow circle, 7 minutes. You time it. He sets it beside the bowl. Leaves. This continues. A third performer brings a bundle of thread. A fourth brings a loaf of unleavened bread balanced on his head. A fifth carries a single sandal. Just one. You lean toward the noble beside you. He doesn't blink. You whisper, "Do you know what's happening?" He whispers back without moving his mouth. No one does. Act 2 begins after a gong sounds. Quietly. From nowhere. Suddenly all 5 performers return and begin moving in slow, perfect unison, each one miming gestures that suggest the following. A ship lost at sea. A dove attempting taxes. A bishop who forgot something important but doesn't want to admit it. The audience is riveted, not because of plot, there is no plot, but because the Emperor is watching, and if he smiles, the whole room exhales. You glance toward him. He's seated alone on a small, elevated platform, wearing a leisure robe. Yes, there's a leisure version, dyed with crushed apricot and embroidered with small lions napping. His slippers are off, his left hand rests on a velvet armrest. His right fingers tap his cheek. That's a good sign. Then suddenly, Act 3. All 5 performers stop, and one very carefully begins to breathe louder. That's it, just breathing, deep, deliberate, symbolic breathing. The sound fills the room, a breath in, a pause, a breath out, another joins, then a third, until all 5 are breathing, not in unison, but in carefully mismatched harmony, like monks arguing politely in rhythm. The audience leans in, you do too against your better judgment. There's something soothing about it. This goes on for 6 minutes, and then one of them sneezes. A real one? Maybe. Maybe not, but it causes the bowl, remember the bowl, to tip over. Water spills. The lights come back. The play ends. No curtain, no bows, just silence, a beat, and then a slow clap. The Emperor's clap. 3 deliberate strikes of hand against hand, followed by an approving nod. It's done. The audience applauds politely as if each clap must first be checked by a council. You do too, softly. Behind you someone mutters, "Much better than last week's production with the blindfolded donkey." As the crowd begins to disperse, the performers vanish without trace as though absorbed back into the fabric of the empire. One moment they exist, the next they're legend. You stand quietly, your mind is still processing everything. The bowl, the breathing, the bread, and you think, in Byzantium even entertainment is a theology, a meditation, a mystery, a slow symbolic journey from nothing to everything to bowl water. You sigh, you feel oddly peaceful and also vaguely hungry. That's the sign of a good show. It's sometime past twilight now, that blue-gray hour when the palace seems to forget whether it's dreaming or still awake. You're following a narrow staircase, stone steps worn smooth by 1,000 quiet ascents, heading toward a chamber rarely discussed even in whispers. Tonight, you've been summoned to witness one of the Empire's strangest, most delicate rituals. The folding of the imperial night robe. Yes, the folding, not the wearing, not the blessing, not the stitching, just the folding. Because in Byzantium, how you end the day is just as sacred as how you begin it. And nothing ends a day quite like carefully, reverently folding the very robe that held the dreams of an emperor. You arrive at the chamber, small, square, with walls painted a soft violet, the kind of color only visible by candlelight and royal decree. 3 low lamps flicker on polished bronze stands, casting long, deliberate shadows across the floor. In the center, laid across a stone table wrapped in silk, is the imperial night robe. It is no longer being worn. The emperor has already changed into his pre-dawn reflection garment, a pale shift robe made for early meditation and mild pacing. Now the night robe rests, and around it 4 officials in identical robes of dove gray stand like mourners at a very stylish funeral. They are known collectively as the Fabrica Nocturna, a small elite order responsible for folding, preserving, and occasionally sighing at imperial garments. One of them turns to you and nods. The ceremony is about to begin. You step to the corner of the room just far enough to witness, just close enough to be implicated in the moment. The lead folder, a man who looks like he irons clouds for fun, steps forward. He bows once to the robe, then again to the table, then murmurs, "From slumber into memory, from memory into form." The others echo it under their breath, like a linen-based hymn. Then the process begins. First fold, the left sleeve drawn inward in a single fluid motion. The embroidery along the cuff, golden wheat threaded with hints of garnet, lines up perfectly with the center seam. You once heard that a single misalignment of the sleeve could be read as an omen of drought. Second fold, the right sleeve, this time guided using a flat ivory ruler, passed down from the reign of Justinian. The edge of the robe whispers against the table like a silk prayer. One folder exhales a little too loudly. He is silently judged by the others. Third fold, the hem drawn up precisely 2 hand widths, revealing the lining, deep crimson embroidered with a tiny mosaic scene of the Annunciation. You wouldn't know unless you were this close. It's hidden, meant only for God, the Emperor, and the Fabrica. They pause. A bell chimes softly outside the chamber. That's the sign. The robe must now be turned, not flipped, never flipped, rotated, gently, slowly, like handling a relic or a sleeping cat. The 4 men move in unison, rotating the robe 180 degrees until the neck opening faces west, toward the wall of last light, where an oil lamp glows beneath a small painting of St. Basil the Confessor, who, according to legend, once folded his own cassock so perfectly that it hovered for 3 days. Final fold, the top of the robe, drawn down across the rest like a closing eyelid. The robe now sits in a perfect square, no larger than a child's pillow. But even like this, it feels powerful, dense with symbolism, as if it might start speaking if left unattended. A small silver box is brought forward, lined in cedar and lavender, engraved with the imperial crest and a single word, COP. The folded robe is lifted into the box with a small silver spatula so that no human fingers touch the garment directly after folding. Yes, a spatula. You try not to react. The lid closes with a soft click, like a hymn being finished. The lead folder turns to the others. They bow. Then he exhales a long, quiet breath that seems to take with it the weight of the entire ceremony. And just like that, it's over. No trumpet, no incense. Just the faint smell of fabric and the strange, still air that follows a sacred act. As you leave the chamber, walking back through the hallway now washed in candlelight, you glance once over your shoulder. The robe is gone, and yet you feel it still there, like a warm hand behind a curtain, like an idea too polite to interrupt. You smile faintly, because here in Byzantium, even folding cloth is holy. Even linen sleeps with dignity, and tomorrow, when the emperor slips into it again, it will carry not just the night's rest, but the weight of perfect silence. You are in the octagonal room of privates, which, despite its name, is not for conversation, not really. In Byzantium, utterance rarely means words. It can mean a look, a breath, a ceremonial clearing of the throat at the exact right moment in front of a religious tapestry. But tonight, utterance means a sigh. The emperor's sigh, to be specific. It is said that once a month, always on the 23rd day, the emperor retreats here alone, wearing his robe of interior reflection to perform a ritual known as the measured exhalation. You've heard whispers of it before. Most people think it's metaphor, a poetic invention, the kind of thing scribes write in the margins of hymns to make themselves feel important. But it's real, and now, for reasons that remain opaque and possibly celestial, you've been permitted to witness it. The room is quiet, candlelit, 8 walls, 8 small niches. Each niche contains a single object, a dried fig, a folded handkerchief, a small icon of Christ Pantocrator, a faded letter written by someone named Theodora, a comb, a bowl of still water, a dried olive branch, and a mirror. You stand by the wall with the letter. It is faintly perfumed with rose water and regret. You don't read it. You know better. In the center of the room, a wooden stool, plain, unadorned, carved from olive wood, aged by time and possibly prophecy. Before it lies a folded cushion embroidered with the phrase, "What is released in breath returns in mercy." The candlelight is soft, diffused, somehow round. You hear the footsteps. Soft, deliberate, linen muted. He enters, the emperor. He wears no crown, no outer robe, just the robe of interior reflection, a flowing garment the color of moonlight seen through sleep. On its cuffs, stitched spirals, like the shape incense makes when it forgets where it's going. He does not speak, he does not nod, he simply walks to the stool and sits. He closes his eyes and he sighs. Not loudly, not dramatically, just fully. The sound fills the room, or rather empties it. A long, slow exhalation that seems to peel the walls back and set the air humming. You've never heard anything like it. There's no anger in it, no sorrow, just release. The kind of sigh you might let out if you'd been carrying the empire for 20 years in shoes that never quite fit. And then he does it again. This time, deeper. The candles flicker. One goes out. The mirror tilts ever so slightly on its niche as if bowing. After the third sigh, a court attendant enters, wordless, invisible, wrapped in gray, and places a glass orb on the ground beside the emperor. The orb, you've been told, is filled with air from the sanctuary of Saint Sophia. He does not touch it. He does not touch it. He simply exhales again, this time toward the orb, and the air inside the glass swirls, softly, faintly, like incense inside a snow globe of divinity. Some say this moment determines the spiritual temperature of the coming month. Others say it's how the emperor prays without asking. The sighs continue, 5 in total. Each one slower, each one lower, each one reshaping the room somehow without moving a single stone. When the 5th sigh leaves his body, he pauses, a long pause, and then he inhales, a simple breath, but it feels like the empire itself has drawn it in. A bell rings. The ritual is over. The emperor rises. The robe flows behind him like forgotten dreams. He does not look at you. He does not need to. He walks out the way he came, footsteps trailing silence. The glass orb remains, still. And you, still standing beside Theodora's letter, feel something loosen in your chest. You exhale too, not in imitation, not in reverence, just because you need it to. And as the candles burn low and the door creaks closed behind you, you think, in Byzantium, even a sigh is sacred. Even the breath you let go becomes a record, a ritual, a throne. It's just after midnight again, but the palace doesn't feel like it's sleeping. It feels like it's holding its breath. You're in the hall of measured sounds, a long, windowless corridor tucked between the imperial library and the bathhouse. Not because it belongs to either, but because it doesn't belong anywhere. And that's exactly why it exists, because this is the hall where noises are tested. Yes, tested. Byzantium, after all, is a place where every sound matters. Every creak of sandal, rustle of robe, and tap of ceremonial spoon must fall within the correct spectrum of acceptability. Too soft, it goes unheard, unnoticed, uninfluential. Too loud, it's offensive, vulgar, possibly heretical. The balance is delicate, so delicate in fact that once a week in the deep night, palace officials conduct a ritual known only as the audit of appropriate volume. You've been summoned to observe. Lucky you. The hall is dim, lit by recessed oil lamps. The walls are lined with velvet drapes, not for decoration, but to absorb echoes. Nothing bounces here. Everything is swallowed except the sound that's meant to be measured. At the far end of the corridor stands a long wooden table, flanked by 3 men in pale green robes with identical beards and absolutely no sense of humor. They are the phonarchs, official auditors of ceremonial sound. They do not speak. They only nod and write on small strips of parchment using sharpened quills dipped in beetroot ink. On the table rest a ceremonial fork for meal clinks, a scroll rod for scriptural unrolling, a tiny sandal for pacing tests, a coin for imperial donation clatter, and a bell. Not a large bell, not even a very good bell, just the bell. You approach quietly. The lead phonarch gestures. It begins. The sound bearer, a short man with incredibly quiet elbows, picks up the first object, the fork. He drops it onto a ceramic plate with a sound so precise, so carefully dull that it seems to apologize to the air. One phonarch tilts his head. Another writes, acceptable, mildly reverent. Next, the scroll rod. The sound bearer unrolls it slowly. The parchment makes a soft hiss like a thoughtful snake. You involuntarily shiver. A phonarch frowns. Another writes, too dry, recommend humidifying chamber or speaking softer theology. Then comes the sandal test. The sound bearer walks exactly 7 steps across a section of waxed floor tiles, each engraved with a cross and a short blessing. The steps produce a delicate rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, hesitation, tap. It sounds just enough like regret to be holy. One phonarch nods deeply, resonant, suggesting Lent. Then the coin. The sound bearer lets it fall from hip height into a bronze basin. It lands with a quiet but firm ping. No one blinks. One phonarch simply scribbles. Sounds charitable. Finally, the bell. The sound bearer lifts it with 2 fingers and gives it a single flick. Not a ring, not a shake, just a tiny motion of intent. The sound that comes out is perfectly wrong. It's too cheerful, too round, too hopeful. One phonarch audibly sighs. The second writes, sounds like it forgives too much. The bell is removed. The sound bearer bows. The ritual ends. No fanfare, no closing chant, just the slow extinguishing of the wall lamps one by one until the hall folds back into quiet like a secret being erased. You step out into the cool corridor, head full of muffled echoes and uncertain clinks, and you begin to understand something you never quite grasped until now. In Byzantium, sound is behavior. Tone is theology. And to make the wrong noise at the wrong time is to misrepresent the empire itself. Every clink, every cough, every whispered prayer, it's not just heard, it's measured. You breathe quietly, very quietly, just in case. You think, here, even silence has volume, and someone somewhere is writing it down. The moon is high now, but it's not watching, it's hiding, tucked behind a veil of clouds, letting the palace glow alone. You've been summoned again, this time to a room whose name makes you pause when you hear it. The Archive of Slight Movements. At first, you think it's a joke, a scribe's pun, one of those absurd exaggerations you'd hear from a bored eunuch after a long dinner. But no, it's real, and it's waiting. You're escorted down a long hallway lined with soft golden tiles that don't click underfoot. Even the walls feel like they've agreed not to echo. You turn a corner, then another, and then arrive before a set of black doors inlaid with silver hinges that resemble feathers. A sign above reads, "That which moves quietly still shifts the empire." Inside, dimness, warmth, and paper. So much paper, not stacked, not shelved, not even bound. Each sheet floats, suspended by threads of silk. Dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of parchment leaves dangle from the ceiling like dry rain, drifting slightly as you enter, rustling like a prayer set through fabric. And each sheet contains just one thing, a recorded movement. Not a battle, not a parade, not a coronation. A twitch, a nod, a shoulder's angle, a hand lifted mid-thought, a finger tapped twice during liturgy, a sigh. Every movement that meant something or could be interpreted to mean something is documented here. Cross-referenced, studied. You step gently through the hanging pages. One reads, Emperor adjusted left sleeve twice during meeting with Armenian envoy. Subtle display of disapproval, or linen too stiff. Another, August Empress blinked 3 times in succession while viewing new icon. Potential irritation with artist. Pollen, will consult her physician. And a third, scrawled more hastily. Chamberlain shifted foot at 6th bell. Shift coincided with pigeon's arrival. Possibly not important. You pass through a curtain of scrolls written in 5 different hands. Each observes a gesture from last week's public audience. How the emperor tilted his head. The precise timing of a smile. Whether his left hand remained over his belt or moved slightly inward. They're debating if it meant war. A court official approaches you from the shadows. He's tall, thin, wearing a robe the color of raw parchment. Around his waist, a belt made entirely of quills, none of them inked. Therefore listening. He bows faintly and says, tonight's observation has already begun. You follow him deeper. There, in the center of the room, beneath a skylight filtered with silk, stands a large chair. Not a throne, not a bench, something in between. A gesture platform. The emperor will sit here for exactly 11 minutes. He will not speak, he will not be addressed. He will simply exist. And the watchers of motion, seated in the shadows, 5 of them, scribes trained in anatomy, rhetoric, and paranoia, will record everything. The emperor arrives. Tonight he wears a robe of ash blue linen, soft and nearly weightless. No jewelry, no belt, just the robe and a small folded cloth in his hand, rumored to be the one his tutor once used to wipe ink from his cheek. He sits, and it begins. He does not fidget, but he breathes. He blinks, slowly. 1 minute in, he lifts the cloth an inch, then lowers it. 2 of the watchers write furiously. Another leans back and sighs in awe. At minute 4, he shifts in his seat, not a full movement, but a settling. His left knee dips, his right foot flexes, the chair creaks, and someone nearby gasps quietly as if the empire itself just made a decision. At minute 7, he scratches his temple. It is majestic. One watcher murmurs, reassessment of tax structure imminent. Another notes, divine uncertainty regarding border negotiations. By the time 11 minutes pass, you feel like you've just watched an opera composed entirely of shoulder placement. The emperor stands. He bows once and leaves. No word, no look, only presence, only motion. And when you step back through the curtain of pages, back toward the exit, you glance up at one of the parchment sheets floating near the door. It reads, on the 23rd of this month, His Majesty shifted weight from right foot to left while listening to monastery envoy. Slight arching of brow, index finger tapped 3 times against knee. Conclusion, empire remains stable. And you think this is Byzantium, where war begins with a lean visrab or pieces a pause, where power is stored in the way a hand settles on an armrest, and every motion, every slight movement is written down, just in case it meant everything, because sometimes it does. It's nearly dawn, but not quite. That fragile in-between hour when the stars are still faintly visible and the first birds begin practicing their morning theology. You're on your way to the atrium of repetition, a space so old and so specifically purposed that even the more seasoned scribes refer to it only in half sentences. You were told simply, today is the emperor's repetition. As if that were an ordinary thing. It's not. You arrive just as a page is lighting the last of the 12 oil lamps, each one hanging from a chain of interlaced gold and linen thread, supposedly spun by blind nuns during the reign of Basil II. The room is square, modest, but sacred in its restraint. There's no throne here, no icons, no symbolism carved into the floor. Just one thing, a single wooden stool in the center, and surrounding it, an open circle made of white stones, evenly spaced. Each stone is etched with one word, again. Because here, the emperor comes to repeat himself. Not because he forgot, not because anyone asked, but because in Byzantium, repetition is discipline, and discipline is holiness. You stand against the wall beside an archivist who has not blinked since you arrived. He holds a blank scroll and a black stylus, not the usual ink, but a form of soot gathered from the roof tiles during Pentecost. Apparently, only shashes can record intentional repetition. The emperor arrives. No entourage. He's barefoot, wearing his vestment of disciplined echo, a pale brown robe with no embroidery, no belt, no symbolism. The cloth is soft but undyed. You know the robe. It's the one he wears only when he's about to repeat something he already knows perfectly. He walks into the center of the stone circle. He sits, he closes his eyes, and he begins. His voice is low, smooth, practiced. He's reciting the creed, not out of obligation, but out of ritual refinement. He speaks each word slowly, evenly, like it's the first time it's ever been said. I believe in one God. The archivist writes nothing. He's not here to record what is said, but how. You watch, and it becomes clear this is no ordinary repetition. This is performance for no audience. Prayer without petition. It is the emperor declaring to no one in particular, I am still who I was yesterday. After the creed, he moves on. The opening lines of Genesis, then an excerpt from the Rule of St. Theodore, then a portion of a speech he gave 12 years ago to the monks of Mount Galesios. Word for word, flawless. But that's not the point. It's not perfection he's seeking. It's alignment between voice and breath, between memory and posture, between rule and ruler. The emperor pauses. He adjusts his left foot slightly, bringing it into perfect symmetry with his right. You wouldn't have noticed except the archivist flinched as if someone had shouted. Then the emperor recites the names of his ancestors. Every one of them, including the ones who reigned only for a month, including the ones whose names are usually whispered behind mosaic columns, with a little too much irony. He speaks them evenly, without judgment, as if saying their names aloud is a way of balancing the weight of all they did and didn't do. By the time he's finished, the sun is beginning to reach the upper windows. The stones on the floor begin to glow faintly, as if proud to have participated. Then, the final act, he repeats his own coronation vow. I will bear the burden of peace and the illusion of power. A pause. Then once more, this time quieter. I will bear the burden of peace and the illusion of power. He opens his eyes, stands, and walks out of the circle, not toward anyone, not waiting for recognition, just complete. The archivist exhales for the first time in an hour and begins slowly curling the scroll. It is still blank. It always is. But the act has been recorded in soot, in silence, in the breath of the room. You remain a moment longer because something about it lingers. Something in the way repetition is not weakness here, but honor. A reminder that sometimes saying the same thing again, with care, with attention, is a form of power stronger than novelty. And you think in Byzantium even what has been said is never finished. It must be heard again to truly belong. Again, and again, and again. It's early afternoon now, though the light inside the Hall of Illustrious Scent suggests a more timeless hour, something between prayer and digestion. The smell reaches you before the sight. You stop in your tracks. It's not overpowering. Not the kind of smell that grabs you by the throat. No, this is the kind of fragrance that sits beside you without asking, that whispers instead of shouts, that reminds you it was here first. This is the Emperor's signature scent, and today is the anointing of the garments, a ritual held only 3 times per year, always behind sealed curtains, always after lunch, and always with at least 2 bishops present to supervise the roses. You step inside the chamber and everything is soft. The air, the lamplight, the floor covered in tapestries that mute your steps as if you've entered someone's dream. In the center of the room, stretched across a table of cypress wood polished so smooth it reflects the soul, are 12 imperial garments, robes, tunics, mantles, hoods, and one truly unfortunate-looking ceremonial vest with far too many peacocks. Each piece lies flat, awaiting its moment. At the far end of the table stands the fragrancer, an ancient figure in layers of green silk who has not spoken a full sentence since the iconoclast controversy, and communicates almost entirely through nods and slow, deliberate breathing. He raises a hand, and it begins. A small clay censer is lit with coals brought directly from the sanctuary hearth. Into it goes a spoonful of resin, frankincense harvested from a particular tree said to lean slightly eastward toward Jerusalem. Then the oils. 6 vessels are brought forward, each marked with a symbol instead of a name. A spiral, a dove, a sun with one closed eye, a broken cup, a fish made of thorns, and a lion sleeping on its back. Each symbol represents a note in the emperor's fragrance. It's not perfume. He would never call it that. It's a scented theology. Each oil is made from a blend of ingredients approved by a committee of monks, physicians, and a retired bishop who once anointed a donkey by mistake and now insists on double-checking everything. You watch as the fragrancer dips a fine brush made of squirrel whiskers and soft linen thread into the oil of the spiral. With the grace of someone painting divine truth onto air, he draws a single curved line across the hem of the emperor's evening robe. He exhales very slowly, then continues. Oil of the dove, applied to the inner sleeves of the walking tunic right where the pulse would beat. It smells faintly of lemon and patience. Oil of the sleeping lion, dabbed onto the hood of the midnight vigil cloak. It smells of wood smoke, clove, and some note you can't place, like the memory of forgiveness. There is no rush. Each application is followed by a moment of stillness, sometimes a whispered prayer, sometimes a humming note only audible if your ears are freshly anointed, yours are not. You glance at the side table. A small parchment reads, "If the scent speaks louder than the robe has failed." This is not vanity. This is olfactory diplomacy. Because when the emperor walks into a room, he must smell like someone who belongs there before you do. He must smell like a man who dreams in scripture and wakes in command. Like someone who could forgive you or forget you, and either way it would be justified. The fragrancer finishes the last robe. He bows, not to the garments, but to the air. An assistant quickly lifts a tiny brass bell, ringing it once. That signifies the scent is now sealed. For the next 3 days, no one may wear perfume within 12 paces of the emperor. Even his food will be lightly scented with non-competing herbs, thyme, mint, a touch of anise. Garlic is forbidden, so is vinegar. So is anything that might overshadow divinely authorized sandalwood. The robes are folded with brushes of soft air, not hands, not gloves, air. They're placed into linen satchels lined with dried lavender and a fragment of old parchment bearing the words, "May the wearer be remembered by the air itself." As the fragrancer retreats, the scent lingers. It clings to your robes, your eyelashes, your memory. It's not sweet, not musky, not earthy. It is imperial. And as you leave the chamber, heart a little slower, eyes a little glassier, you think, in Byzantium, the emperor doesn't enter a room, he arrives in scent. And long after he's gone, he stays. It's late now. Not night, but the hour after all duties have ended, when even the candle flames seem tired of standing upright. You walk through a hallway so quiet you hear your own robes shift, the sound of fabric breathing. Ahead of you, a single door stands open, and a faint glow spills out. You've reached the room of final gazes. This is not a death chamber. No one is sick, no one is leaving, but something still ends here, every night. This is the place where the emperor comes, not to rule, not to speak, not even to think, but to look. Because in Byzantium, what the emperor sees before sleep determines the spiritual climate of the next day. The theory is ancient, possibly absurd, definitely sacred, and it's your turn to assist. You enter. The room is small, octagonal, quiet, soft. One lamp burns at the center of a carved wooden table. The light is filtered through thin strips of alabaster, making it glow like the inside of a thought. There is no furniture, but one long reclining couch, low to the ground, covered in white linen, stitched with tiny black dots. The dots are not decorative, they form the outline of constellations, northern and southern skies, stars he'll never visit but must still acknowledge. Across from the couch stands the wall of gaze. That's what it's called. Really, a wall covered not in painting or mosaic, but in a revolving display of sacred images, carefully curated and changed each night by the order of visual curators, whose only job is to decide what the emperor should look at before he closes his eyes. Tonight's arrangement includes an icon of St. John the Theologian, eyes looking down, a bronze relief of a vineyard at dusk, a faded sketch of the emperor's first teacher, asleep at a desk, a strip of blue linen once part of the empress's childhood robe, and in the center a mirror, not to reflect himself, but to remind him he's always being watched, by history, by heaven, and by his own face. The emperor enters, he says nothing, wearing his night robe of humble reception, a simple white garment with a black collar and an embroidered phrase on the hem. The last thing seen becomes the first thing carried. He reclines, Slowly, his attendants pull the curtains partway closed, not all the way so the images remain visible, but softer now like memories inside a dream. You sit at a respectful distance. You are the gaze recorder tonight. You don't write what he sees. You write how long he sees it. You begin. First minute, he stares at the vineyard, eyes half-lidded, breath slow. You write 1:14, vineyard. No movement. Second minute, his gaze shifts to the linen cloth. His thumb twitches slightly. You note subtle tension, possible recognition. Third and fourth minutes, he closes his eyes but keeps his head turned toward the icon. You don't write anything. The silence says it for you. Then comes the mirror. He opens his eyes, looks directly into it, and something changes. Not in him, in the room. The air gets heavier, not darker, just more full, like a thought you're trying not to think. He holds the gaze, longer than usual, longer than what's written in the manual. You write 3:07. Mirror gaze. Prolonged, no shift, face unreadable. Then without a word, he stands, walks once around the room, slowly, reverently, stopping for a breath in front of each object as if confirming their presence. Then he leaves, and the images, they're removed immediately. Every single night, they are replaced, not reused, not repurposed, because the Emperor must never fall asleep looking at the past. He must wake with new vision, and you, still sitting there, scroll cooling in your lap, realize you've just recorded something impossible. Not just a gaze, but a weight being laid down. A decision made in the quietest part of the day. You blow gently on the ink. It dries into permanence. And as you leave the chamber, closing the door behind you, you whisper, "Good night, Majesty." Though you know he's still staring at something you can't see. It's the final hour before dawn, the one too sacred for language, too quiet for thought. You walk the long, curving path toward the sanctum of stillness with slow, measured steps, as if hurrying might wake the walls. This is the last rite before rest, not for the Emperor, for the palace itself, because Byzantium does not sleep by accident. It is put to sleep. The sanctum of stillness is deep underground, beneath the private chapel, beneath the reliquary storage, beneath even the pipes that carry warm water through the marble. Few people know it exists. Fewer know what happens here. You do. Tonight, you are the stillness attendant. No one trains you, no one speaks. You simply enter. The chamber is round. No corners, no altar, no windows. Its walls are curved and smooth, coated in crushed oyster shell and chalk, meant to muffle every sound into non-existence. In the center is a single object, a bowl. Stone, shallow, empty. But around it are 12 seated figures, each robed in identical gray fabric, faces shadowed by deep hoods, hands resting on knees. These are the quiet keepers. They do not speak, they do not move, they breathe. Together, one breath in, hold, one breath out, again. You take your place at the edge of the circle just behind the bowl. From the archway above, the last candle is lowered, a long taper whose flame has traveled uninterrupted from the vigil lamp of the Emperor's chamber. It has passed through corridors, whispered past scrolls and relics, cradled by hand after silent hand. Now it rests above the bowl. You step forward. You whisper the closing invocation, the only words permitted in this space. Let the voice of the stones become the sleep of the empire. You lower the candle. Let the flame kiss the bowl's base. Let it flicker once, twice, then disappear. And in that moment, everything stops. Not metaphorically. Actually, the air halts. The floor seems to hold its breath. Even your thoughts feel muffled as if someone pressed a cool hand against your mind. This is the stillness, the end of the day, not its collapse, not its decay, its intentional surrender. Here, deep beneath politics and prayer, beneath tapestries and treaties, the empire is allowed to pause. The quiet keepers begin to hum, not with voice, with throat. Low, wordless resonance, not music, not melody, just vibration. A frequency felt more than heard, designed not to be understood, but to be carried. It enters your chest, lingers behind your ribs, makes your spine soften. The room vibrates like a held note, not rising, not falling, only staying. Then, like breath behind a dream, the hum fades. One by one, the quiet keepers stand and place a smooth stone in the bowl. Each stone is engraved with a single word: forgive, hold, still, remember, be close. You don't look at them all, you don't need to. The final stone is yours. You walk forward, reach into your robe and remove it, still warm from your body. Your word is rest. You place it in the bowl. Step back. The circle is complete. The silence now is not absence, it is presence. And as you walk out, past the shuttered lamps, the bowed doorways, the resting breath of an empire that has finally let go of the day, you know what must come next. Sleep. But not yours. You are simply the last breath exhaled. In Byzantium, it is sleeping. Wrapped in linen, anointed in oil, guarded by silence, held in stillness, just as it should be. The sky is ink now, not dark, but deep. The kind of color that doesn't fall but pulls upward. Overhead, Constantinople lies wrapped in its own hush. Domes glint faintly in moonlight, cypress trees barely sway, and even the pigeons seem to have agreed to rest. You're walking the final hallway, the corridor of diminishing flame. So named because its lanterns shrink in size the farther you go. The first is tall as a man. The last is no bigger than a matchstick, flickering like it's remembering the idea of light rather than providing it. Ahead of you, a door. Beyond it, the Emperor's chamber of ceasing thoughts. This is it. The end. Not the end of reign, not of life, but the end of wakefulness. Where the Emperor is not ruler, nor priest, nor icon. He is simply a man who must now close his eyes and not dream anything too loud. You enter. It is quiet, yes, but not empty. The room breathes. There's no throne here, no books, no guards. Only the Emperor's bed, low and wide, canopied in deep indigo velvet. The curtains are drawn back. The linens are smoothed. A single silver cup of warm water sits on a stand carved with 12 tiny moons, and the Emperor himself is already reclining. He wears his final garment of the day, a soft white tunic stitched only at the cuffs with golden threads so fine it looks like dried breath. He's barefoot, hair down, face unreadable, not because it's guarded, but because everything has been laid down. A small group stands at the edge of the room, his silent circle. 5 individuals, each holding a candle, each assigned to represent something he must let go of before sleep. Burden, desire, fear, memory, name. You're here for the 6th candle, the one without a label, because yours represents what cannot be said. You step forward. The Emperor does not look at you, but he knows you're there. Each candle is brought to him, one by one. He lifts his hand, cups the flame, not to extinguish it, just to feel it. One flicker, one breath, one release, and the flame is snuffed. No words are spoken. The candles are carried away. When yours comes, he lingers, fingers hovering over the fire. You do not move. Then he closes his eyes, opens them again, and blows. Your candle goes out. You leave the room. Only one light remains now, the star lamp suspended from the ceiling above his bed. A small, pierced sphere of gold filled with wax and myrrh, its light speckling the ceiling in 1,000 slow constellations. He lies back. Curtains are drawn, not by hand, but by a mechanism of silk pulleys. So quiet you wonder if it's dreamt into motion. And in that moment, the palace exhales. The final scroll is sealed, the last robe is folded, the stones are cooled, the empire is asleep. Not because it collapsed, not because it forgot, but because sleep is the final act of governance. The last assertion of the world is still in order, still breathing, still held. You walk out of the chamber, down the last stretch of the corridor, past the shrinking lanterns until even their memory is dimmed. The sea is quiet beyond the walls. The stars have stilled, and Byzantium sleeps, not with both eyes closed, but with one eye dreaming and the other watching history from the dark. You stop, take one breath, and let it go. End of script. Sweet dreams.